rhyming and doodling so he could bug her. When he put his arms around her, quite to his surprise he found her doodling away, doodling away. We just doodle all day. 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 We just all day. We just all
To order the Santa Barbara City Planning Commission meeting of October 6, 2011. Ms. Rodriguez, would you please call the roll?
Here. Here.
Here.
Your mic's not on.
Commissioner Bartlett.
Here.
Vice Chair Lodge.
Here.
Chair Jostes.
Here. Okay. Moving right along, we'll start with our preliminary matters, which is action on and review of the minutes and resolutions, specifically the draft minutes of September 22nd, 2011, and resolution 019-11 regarding 1820 to 1826 De La Vina Street. Are there any recommended changes or refinements to the draft minutes? I believe, Ms. Lodge, you had indicated that you had some minor refinements to those.
Yes. I'm sorry here. There.
Was a clarification of comments that you made regarding
Yes, there were a couple
parking at De La
there were a couple
Plaza.
of typos that were corrected at the. I'm sorry. Once again, I'm having difficulty finding that page.
Commissioner Lodge, try page 7 of the September 22nd minutes.
Yeah, my problem is I can't find the September 22nd minutes. And I had a problem with that in the lunch meeting as well. Oh, here we are. Okay, on page 7, September 22nd, 2011 minutes. Toward the bottom of the page, the commissioners made the following comments. It says, Commissioner Lodge would like the environmental analysis to look at the impact of removing all parking, particularly the parking spaces that currently exist along the interior of the road near City Hall. What I said, or meant to say at least, was to look at the impact of removing the, and then without all parking, particularly in there, just so it says removing the parking spaces that currently exist along the interior of the road near City Hall. Actually,
Okay.
across from City Hall.
Any changes to the resolution in question? Mr. Bartlett.
Actually, I have an item on the check on Commissioner Jordan's name.
Oops.
That's it.
Okay. Any changes to Resolution 019-11? Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as modified in Resolution 019-11?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. At this point, Mr. Cato, do we have any requests for continuances, withdrawals, or additions of ex-agenda items?
Yes, we do have one continuance. The consent item for today for Moffett is being continued till the first meeting in November, November 3rd.
Okay. And are there any announcements?
Yes, I
Okay,
have
yes.
one announcement, and that is the recruitment period for city boards and commissions is now open. The deadline is October 17th. You have to get an application into the city clerk's office. You can go to the city's website. That's www.santabarbaraca.gov. And you can go to the boards and commissions section, and there's applications, and there's a whole write-up of why you should be a commissioner.
Excellent. Well, we hope we get some good candidates, and
So spread the word.
thank you. Okay, at this point in time, I'd like to open up the public portion of the commission's meeting this afternoon to matters of the public who wish to address the commission on matters which are not on our agenda today. Seeing no one coming forward, I'll close that portion, and we will move directly to a new item, or item 4A, which is the application of Trudy Carey for a subdivision at 457 North Hope Avenue. Mr. Lawson.
Chair Justice, members of the Commission, good afternoon. The proposed project, 457 North Hope Avenue, it can be found approximately midway between Foothill Road and State Street due east of North Okumba Road. The 2.98 acre project site is currently vacant. The previous development was removed a little less than 2 years ago. The site includes a 10-foot wide city sewer easement along the north property line, and that sewer line also serves all the residential development along the north property line. Surrounding the site is a typical single-family residential development. And the parcels that comprise of the development range in size from as low as 6,500 square feet to as high as 25,000 square feet. A shot of the site viewing north, you can see the development around the site, and it is comprised of single-story and two-story residential development. So the project before you today will be a 9-lot subdivision. Average size is approximately 11,470 square feet of net lot area. A new cul-de-sac road dedicated to the city. Detachment from county service, area number 32, the sheriff's department, county fire, as well as the water district. Project includes annexation to the city from the county, a general plan amendment, a rezone, a modification for a street frontage on lot number 8. So this is the layout of the proposed project. The major components, the applicant will go in more detail, but major components include a 40-foot right-of-way, and the existing 10-foot wide sewer easement will be reduced to 8 feet, And one note is, after the plans were handed out to a commission, they were updated to include a little bit wider right-of-way, the 40-foot. Your plans show a 38-foot wide right-of-way. So the plans we have for the Sheridan stamp reflect that 40-foot wide right-of-way, and the conditions are accurate to a 40-foot wide right-of-way. There'll be two common area detention basins, one at the cul-de-sac and one at the beginning of the proposed road. Basically, the lot in the middle drains east and then west. So the first four lots will have detention basins that will drain towards Hope Avenue. And finally, the project will include additional 3 feet of right-of-way to improve the Hope Avenue sidewalk. So this is a view of the city zoning map. What you see in white is the county area. Most of the area is E3. Both the county general plan and the city general plan are the same in this area, which is residential. The county zone district is AR1, 8,000 square foot minimum. And for the city, it's E3, 7,500 square foot minimum. And that is what's been proposed for this lot. A negative declaration was prepared for the project. All impacts were less than significant, or there were no impacts. We did include some recommended mitigations within the 4 impact areas of air quality, geophysical, noise, and transportation. So the next step after your commission will be for council to consider annexation of a subject lot from the county to the city, the general plan amendment request, the rezone request, and then following council will be LAFCO to consider the detachment and annexation of a subject lot. So with that, we have, staff has 2 recommendations. The first is that your commission recommend to council to approve the annexation of a subject lot, to approve the general plan amendment, and to approve the zoning map amendment. Secondly, we recommend that contingent upon approval of council, that you approve the project, the street modification to allow proposed lot A to reduce from 60 feet to 38 feet, and that you approve the tentative subdivision map to allow division of 1 parcel into 9 parcels. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. At this point, I'd like to invite the applicant to come up and make a short presentation to the commission. We normally allow 15 minutes. I'm sure this is much more straightforward than 15 minutes, but I'll leave that up to your discretion. Ms.
Okay.
Carey?
I thought maybe you knew me better than I thought. I'm not that short usually. I'm Trudy Carey of the Carey Group. I represent the applicant today. For those of you who don't know us, we're a small architectural development firm in Santa Barbara. We're architects, general contractors, and we are the brokers also for the homes. If I can't answer a question for you today, Mike Assessi is our civil engineer is here. Peter Brown is our land use attorney, and Julio Vena is our landscape architect. If you're not familiar with some of our projects, it's unusual. We have built 3 projects right in this immediate 2 blocks. We built Nathan Road 28 years ago up the street. We were the project manager and the brokers for Mike Toves for LaCumber Hills, which is the affordable that this site abuts. And directly across from LaCumber Hills is Stacy Lane, and we built those 13 homes 10 years ago. So we've got 3 projects you can see that are up. We'll get started. I'm going to go, I forgot the pointer. I'm going to go quickly, and so you know I have the slides. We can go back to them, but I'm not going to go into them in detail because there's a lot of work, and you don't need to see all this minute, I think. Want to get started? Oh, we're having a glitch. Well, Peter showed you the zoning map while they're waiting for the slide. What's interesting about this site is it's very long and narrow. It's only 200 feet on Hope Avenue, but it's 650 feet deep. In most planners, we'd rather have a 1 to 1.5 ratio. So it was very hard to figure out where to put the new street. We couldn't get 2 streets in there. We couldn't get it to go diagonally. It was mathematically, if you go by the city ordinances, you couldn't make it mathematically work out. And that's how we got our site plan. Also, since I worked on the Lacumber Hills project, I can tell you that's in the E3 zone. We annexed that site to the city, and we had to get a variance or modification to build smaller lots there for affordable housing. So they don't meet the code of the neighborhood, which is 7,500 feet. Their lots, I think, are 5,000 or 6,000 feet. But we did that with the Planning Commission. When we were in the field, one of the commissioners asked me about the length and the width of the lots, I think. The minimum lot width there is 60 feet by code, and our average lot width is 72 feet. If you take out the 2 setbacks of 12 feet, you end up with a net of 58 feet wide for a buildable area. I can't help you, Samantha. We came here at 10 o'clock, and it worked perfectly. We've got a fire department cul-de-sac, which took up quite a bit of land. We're complying with the BMP Clean Water, which has got private retention on every lot, and we've got public retention in the middle of the cul-de-sac, also out by Hope Avenue. And Public Works asked us to get an easement to cross the property line and put a pipe into the V-ditch into Lacumber Hills, and we got that easement. And the right-of-way is non-conforming at Hope, so we're going to deed Hope Avenue 3 or 4 feet at the front, move the sidewalk over, and put in a parkway as we looked at in the field. It's okay.
Ms. Gary, while we're waiting, you heard the Planning Commission staff report by Mr. Lawson.
Yes.
Are there any additional points of information that you believe we need to know in addition to what Mr. Lawson covered that would help us get our arms around the subdivision as you've proposed it and understand any nuances? We did do the site visit, and we're familiar with the site.
I guess there's been 2 neighborhood letters that had questions, and I have details about answering their questions if you want to see those. I think they've all been resolved. And last but not least, we have a request that Public Works, originally, the neighbors were very concerned that we have a 14-foot light and not a 20-foot pole beneath their houses. And at first, Public Works agreed with that, and they deemed us complete. And then later, afterwards, they decided that they probably should have it be 20 feet for safety and for code. And the neighbors would like to request, and so do I, that the pole be 14 feet. There was just one installed on Manitou Drive, and I have slides of that. So that would be a request we have that's different than our conditions.
Okay. Well, now that we've got electronic power, let's proceed.
Okay, we're going to go. I get the message, and we're going to go quickly. So hello, here I am. Here's Lacumber Hills. Here's our site, long and narrow. Lincoln Drive is down here. We couldn't get that to hook up. And this is a flag lot that goes to Mr. Anderson's. And I've just told you all this, so we'll go, Dale. I just wanted to show you, this is the current problem with the property. Lacumber Hills water is draining to the south, and it ponds here, it ponds here, it ponds here, and it ponds here. This site crowns in the middle, so all the water is going this way, and it goes down here and down here. We obtained an easement through here with a pipe, and now all this water is going to go down here. These 2 corners get lifted up a little bit to make that flow. Those are the existing sheds that are on site. We took down the combustible buildings, but not the metal sheds. This is kind of an interest, and you probably haven't seen this. In 1962, the Lincoln neighbors to the top subdivision, their septic systems failed. They approached this owner of the site where we are now, and they acquired for $1 from Mr. Radu a 10-foot wide easement. They put in a sewer line, they hooked up all these houses, and at that time, they put in 9 Ys to connect the future division of this property into 9 lots. And that's been of record since 1962. Public Works would prefer to have us not hook up to those because they're in a planter area. They prefer sewer lines be under a public street for access, so we're going to be putting in a new sewer line and leaving this one in place. If these owners want to, they could hook up to the new one here, or they can just stay where they are. It's all working, but that's up to them. We actually still pay a sewer bill on the 3 houses we pay to the city. Even though we're in the county, we've been paying for 3 sewer bills in the city. And then these are the existing things. The things we haven't talked about, there's a curb cut here, there's a curb cut here. This is Mr. Anderson's house again that goes through here. Mr. Stallings lives here. He did not need an easement through. You'll see that. And the easement runs this whole length. So we'll keep going. This is just kind of interesting because it was a 1950s neighborhood that has been evolving. People have put on second floors. They've enlarged their houses. Some have been bulldozed in new houses. If you look across Hope Avenue, it's predominantly 2-story houses. You'll see them along Hope. That's the newer Lincoln Road neighborhood. Above us on Lincoln Road, there are 2-story houses that abut our property. This is actually Mr. Bell's house that goes uphill. His lot's right there. This is very interesting to me as a planner. This is a LaCumber Hills affordable house. It's right there. And they put on an addition and they put stone on their house. And they cannot recover that in resale. So it's very interesting. And then this is off of Sunset Lane. There's a pop-up. But if you drive around the neighborhood, you'll see that these houses have gotten bigger. We do our own mailing list different than the city. We've mailed 6 times to the neighbors that we thought were the closest. We've had 2 neighborhood meetings, and we've had input from maybe 15 people who we've mailed to 6 times. These are the people we've had contact with. And this is the site plan we ultimately ended up with everybody's input. Okay, Al? Next one. I'm not going to go through this because we've addressed everything, but these are all the neighbors immediately who contacted me. These were their questions, and starting from here all the way around, and we've addressed all of them, but these are the things that came up, and I'm not going to read them to you. So this was Public Works input, Planning's input, and the things that they required of us, and we've met all these things. The only thing we would like to suggest is we use a 14-foot pole and not a 20-foot pole. And I put this as an illustration because this is an unusual site. So on our existing neighbors to the north, this is Ms. Shea's house, and she wrote you a letter. She prefers the street to be to the south instead of the north. She's not opposed to the project. But if you go from the lowest tip of her house to our setback for a new house, we're 126 feet away. By code, that would normally be 12 feet, 6 and 6. If you go down on this end, on this particular lot, 29 feet to the setback. LaCumber Hills, we're 26 feet away, and here's 27. This is Mr. Bell's. He's 31 feet from here, 31 feet here and 41 feet there, which normally would be 12. To the south, 56 feet, 40 feet. So the setbacks are pretty gracious between houses, and I think moving the street, everybody came out kind of equal. Okay? This is to give you an idea of the grade change, because I think when you see the export and import, it can be a little overwhelming. These are the average changes to each of these lots. So this is going up 6 inches. This is Mr. Rowell's house. To get this water to drain this way, this lot is going up an average of a foot to get it to go this way. This one comes up a foot. This has no change. This is the crown of the hill. It's coming down about 18 inches. This goes up a foot, no change, and up about 6 feet. 6 inches. And if you want to see this in site section, it's in the drawings, but this is a profile going through the 4-foot retaining wall right here. You can see that little white piece right there. You can see it right there. So on this particular lot, you can see that we're actually taking it down predominantly. It stays the same. We have to fill this little edge on the property line to get the water to go that way. So as an illustration. This is just kind of fun. This is Stacy Lane that we built 10 years ago. Those were the trees at 4 years. And I shot this last weekend. When you come down Stacy Lane, you can't see the house except maybe the car and the garage door. And this is shooting. That's actually a detention basin with sycamore trees. To give you an idea of growth after years. So this is the question we have for you. This is the new city light they put up on the mesa. It's the 20-foot tall pole, and this arm goes up another 18 inches. You can see on the mesa, this is a thoroughfare with 4 or 5 lanes. I think there might be a turning lane in the middle. Our street is really only for 7 lots long because 2 are on the cul-de-sac. It's only 20 feet wide with passing lanes. It only has houses on 1 street. And we just think aesthetically and keeping with the neighborhood and for the neighborhood lighting. Keep going, Gail. We did this in Photoshop, but here's a 20-foot pole, and here's the 14-foot pole. And we just found this out yesterday. We'll go to the next one. That's what's just been installed on Manitou. That's a 14-foot. They cut off the old concrete post, and they actually put the cap on top. And we would like to do we'd do a new pole, but we would do something similar to that. So if you go to the next slide, on our drawings or on our conditions, it's asking us to use B08, which is the 20-foot pole, and we'd like to ask if we could use C08, which is the 14-foot pole. It's important to the neighbors above us. Besides the scale of our property, their floors are about 10 feet above us, and if their eye level is another 5 feet, they're at 15 feet, and if you put in a 22-foot pole, they're going to look out the window, and the halo's coming down of where they look out at night. If you put in a 14-foot pole, they'll be equal or above that light, and it just seems for the neighborhood it would be nicer. Okay, these are the neighbor letters of support you got in your packets. There's one from LaCumber Hills. There's that's okay. And then I'm being my briefest. In the end result, we captured, we think, all the neighborhood concerns plus the requirements of planning and public works, and we got a good solution. We have a 10-foot landscape buffer between here. The existing sewer easement, which is now 10 feet, is going to be amended to be 8 feet because Public Works needed 2 feet to put the no parking signs. So we had to put 2 feet for that. We had granted the city the right-of-way and the land for that. We're putting the sidewalk on one side. The street is 20 feet. There's on-street parking, double of what's required. We're going to put a new sewer down the center of the street and not hook into the existing one, which is expensive for us. We don't have many retaining walls. You have a 4-foot wall right here. It goes to 3 feet, and it goes to 2 feet right there. And there's a short one right there. And we're eliminating a county island. And now the Public Works will be able to get to this sewer and this sewer without going through somebody's backyard, which was the problem when this was flipped around. This neighbor had rodent control. We'll be fixing that. This is a private retention basin. All these lots have been pre-planned. And for the street, the water will go into here and then go through a pipe this way. Here it goes into this retention basin and it goes out that way. And these 4 go through a pipe and go out that way. The other thing I should point out is that the lot lines did not go parallel with these exactly, which gives them a little more view quarter than if they were lined up exactly. And one thing I learned on all this is you can't have a tree in the middle of the cul-de-sac per the fire department, which I didn't know. I had to erase that. So that really sums up my presentation, unless you want to see anything else.
We'll ask questions after we hear from the public.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. At this point in time, I'd like to open up the public portion on this specific item. Thank you, Danny. Our first speaker is going to be Claude Doré, and he will be followed by Britt Jewett. If you could limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes.
Okay. I live at 3845 Lincoln Road. That's the street, that's the home, and that's exactly right there. Lived there for 14 years with my wife and our kids, and we enjoyed the ability of the kids to feed the goats carrots through the fence from our garden, but we've always known that someday this lot was going to be developed. And we support the plan. If you can't have a farm in the backyard, we think that this development plan is about as good as we can do. I happen to know Trudy Carey, seen some of the other things she's built, have confidence that what she builds will be consistent with the neighborhood and will enhance the values of the neighborhood. I don't pretend to understand the expertise behind what kind of lights go in and where the where the drains should go and things like that. Maybe I'm naive, but I have confidence in the process. There are experts involved who are advising on that. Our neighborhood has been well aware of this. Trudy has not only made a good effort, but we're a close neighborhood on that street. We have 3 events a year. We have a common email list. We communicate a lot. We've invited Trudy to our block parties for the last couple of years. She's come to a couple of them with her maps. She's received input. Informally, she's always been open and receptive to us. The 9 parcels does not, to me, seem at all excessive. I'd love it if the road were on the other side, but I understand why it is where it is. The street width seems reasonable to me. Anything wider than that would seem kind of silly given the number of lots and the size of the other streets around. We have a drainage pipe from the end of Lincoln Road on our neighbor's property immediately to the right that currently drains out into the middle of that lot, right about that upper left lot. It will be nice to have it drain somewhere more formally and more appropriate than in the middle of a field. So it'll be nice that that's taken care of. So in sum, we're in favor. We feel that Trudy Carey has been very communicative, and we'd like to see the project approved.
Thank you for your brevity.
Thank you.
Mr. Jewett?
Hi, my name is Britt Jewett, and I'm here to speak in support of the proposal. I think that the plan embodies sound planning principles by virtue of its location and design. The location as an infill parcel in an established residential zone is inherently resource efficient. That is, in its ability to tie to existing infrastructure rather than extend them. This is a well-recognized green concept and a preferred approach wherever possible. The location is also close to established commercial zones. Shopping, entertainment, and services are close enough to eliminate or sharply reduce driving, and that's another highly desirable principle. The design is absolutely compatible with neighboring parcels in its use and scale, and as such, I think it will blend seamlessly with the fabric of the surrounding neighborhoods. In general, the proposal is a model of established principles of good planning and deserving of your support and approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Greg Reck. Mr. Reck.
Hi there, my name is Greg Reck. I've had the pleasure of working with the Carey Group in the past, and so I'm familiar with the high quality of their projects. And as Trudy had alluded to and the first speaker noted, I'm not surprised at all that she sought out neighborhood input. That doesn't surprise me. It's something that Trudy has always done. It may be required of projects in the city now, but Trudy has always believed in that, and so that's great to see. I believe that the project is consistent with the neighborhood. I appreciate the size of the lots and that the use is consistent with the neighborhood. And when Trudy called me earlier this week and talked to me about the project, I took a look online at the various documents, and she had also mentioned about the light poles being 14 feet versus 20 feet. And I would certainly encourage you to pass along the 14-foot height. I think that that's appropriate for residential development and a street of that width, as opposed to something like Cliff Drive, where you've got a much wider street. So I'm in support of it, and I hope that you are also. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, is there anybody else in the audience who would like to address the commission on this item? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close the public portion, bring it back to the commission. Are there any burning questions on the part of the commissioners, for either staff or the applicant? Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, in looking at the plans that were included in our packet and the staff report, I just want to get clarification on the width for Lot 8 for this area right here. On the plans, it's indicating 28.3 feet. In the staff report, it's called is 38 feet.
True, Justice. Commissioner Bartlett, it is 38 feet. That was a typo on those plans, and we've corrected the updated set. 38 feet. That is correct.
And then I have another question for staff. And it relates to essentially the inclusionary housing ordinance and how it applies to this particular subdivision. It's more clear to me how it applies to development when you're actually building units on the ground, but it's a little bit different when you're developing lots. And I would like to understand sort of the ramifications of how the inclusionary housing ordinance applies to subdivisions and the number of lots created and whether or not you're obligated to do the in lieu fees or if you can build the affordable houses within the project. So a little clarity on that would really help me out and hopefully others.
Chair Joseph, Commissioner Bartlett, the in lieu fee is essentially, usually we see a lot more with the condo type of development. So it's a little bit unusual, but it's in a similar vein. We're basically creating additional lots, and when you're less than 10 parcels, you can pay an in lieu fee. So even if they're it doesn't really matter if they are including development or not. The fact is they're creating additional lots and therefore are assessed the in lieu fee. Now, as an option, they could also go to an affordable housing component. Off the top of my head, I don't have all the answers about how many or they could include or not, but when you're below 10, you definitely have more options for in lieu or building affordable.
Right. It was confusing in reading the ordinance because it said that it was talking about the in lieu fees for subdivisions of 10 or more. So that's why I wasn't quite sure how that worked on this one when they're proposing 9 lots. So that's why I was hoping for some clarity on that.
Well, definitely when you're at more than 10, then you're obligated to provide affordable units depending on how many you're proposing. I forget the percentage, but it is a percentage basis and it is an absolute obligation.
So below 10, then it's prorated.
And below 10 is an option to either construct or pay. Does that help or confuse?
I think Mr. Vincent will clarify here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, the inclusionary ordinance requirements for projects, and this would be considered a residential lot subdivision because no structures are proposed as part of the project. For projects that have 10 or fewer than 10 lots, there is an option. The developer could construct one lot or construct one affordable unit as part of the project or pay a prorated in lieu fee. And the ordinance explains how to calculate that in lieu fee and how it's prorated for these numbers of lots. Do you want to go through that calculation process, or I'm trying to get a sense of if we're answering your questions.
So there's an option then when you're less than 10, you can pay an in lieu fee, or you could build one.
That's correct.
When you're 10 or more, then what happens in that case?
Again, the in lieu fee is calculated differently when it's 10 or more, or the option is still always available to build on site. If you build on site, then you have the bonus density units that are allowed.
Okay, great. That helps. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lodge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question for Ms. Carey. And you did mention the issues and the concerns that Mr. Bell, the Bells have about the grading. And his letter says that the grade will be raised in this area another 2 to 4 feet. Is that accurate?
Well, I think I didn't get a chance to talk to Mr. Bell because he wrote the letter and he's out of town, but I just don't think he understands that what's called for is a 4-foot retaining wall right here that we are going to put dirt against, but the overall lot's only going up a foot. And if you were going to build a house there, the average grade right now is right here, and that's not changing at all. We're trying to get the side yard to drain that way. So I think if I understand it right, in his mind, the house is going to be 4 feet taller than it would be today. It's not affecting where the average pad is. It's just where it tapers off down to the property line like that because his lot's on the side of a hill. And so he's reading that as, oh, you're raising everything up 4 feet or 2 feet.
All right, so
And
this is just
show the side section for a second. And I haven't been able to. He's met with Mr. Lawson too, but see right here, that's where the fill. See a little white thing, or right down here. That's where this has to be leveled out to get that water to go. But you can see it's almost dead level. The house is probably going to be built at this height. That's existing grade, that dotted line. So this is actually coming down, and this has to go up right in here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I just have a couple of questions for staff, and one of them has to do with, I think the last time this commission, before my tenure, saw it, and some comments were made both on lot sizes and the no inclusion of footprints, suggested footprints for the houses. And so one of the findings is that the lots and/or lots and the potential housing development has to be consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. And I don't see anything in the staff report other than staff saying that it is. But when we're going through the applicant's slides really quickly where it shows the surrounding plots, as quickly as I can see it, it looks like most of the surrounding lots are smaller than the proposed lots. So I'm wondering if you could comment on how we got to the recommendation that it is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood.
Chair Justice, Commissioner Jordan.
There's actually, excuse me, there's actually a better one where I think you actually have the county plot plans that was making more sense to me. Because it shows, I think it shows your lots and their lots. Sorry, Peter.
Well, Commissioner Jordan, to be clear, this map I have up is from our mapping database, and that does represent all the assessor parcels around the project site. And when we get the computer working, you know, I went out actually probably about another 100 yards out and just did a review of different parcels around the site. At one point, probably about due west by one street, I found a half acre. I found, as you see on the slide, 6,500 square feet. I found quarter acre. I mean, it's a wide range of parcels. So the applicant is proposing an average of 11,000 square feet net. And that seemed in line with what I found. Certainly a little bit on the higher end, but not out of scale with what I found in the neighborhood. So that's why I focus my, consistency with the neighborhood.
Is it not normal practice to, I think I've seen it at Single Family Design Board where they have when they're talking about FARs and surroundings. So when you're talking about subdivisions like this and the lots that are surrounding, not to show a chart as part of the staff report that actually indicates the square footage of surrounding lots and the lots that are under question?
Usually for FAR purpose, when you want to move beyond 85% FAR, some people come in at 100% and then they'll be required to go out and do that work of finding out what the surrounding area is in order for the board to find support for someone coming in at 100%. When you're below 85%, typically they don't do that kind of homework. But definitely they supply photos so someone can come in at a 50% FAR and have, two-story and a single-story development. So definitely look at that. But back to this, before us we have a subdivision of 9 parcels, and the question is that average size of 11,000 square foot in keeping with the neighborhood, or is it in a neighborhood of really small parcels? and found a wide range.
Okay, and then I think I have a tangent question, and I think I asked you about this the other day at the lot. Does the pedestrian master plan just not address when it asks for an improvement and the project accomplishes that improvement in regards to a widening of a sidewalk, and then as a result of that widening, there's nothing there to address the appearance all of a sudden, then as a result of that, of a utility pole in the middle of the sidewalk? So we have a plan that puts the improvement on the applicant's shoulders of widening the sidewalk, and then we simply live with a utility pole in the middle of the sidewalk?
So after that question came up, I went back to Public Works Transportation. We talked about that, and really it's a case-by-case basis. In a situation for this project, there is an underground vault, I believe in the northwestern corner near where the utility pole is. So on a case-by-case basis, the question comes up, what is the cost benefit? Because as we saw down Hope Avenue, you have a really big neighborhood poles all the way down. There's no opportunity to underground any of that and make it make sense to underground. Next question is, what about moving the pole 2 feet over? As soon as you dig that up, you're looking probably, $100,000, $200,000, depending on the size of it. What's the cost benefit of moving it 2 feet at really high cost?
Okay, understood. I guess it's more of a comment then, that it just seems a little futile to widen the sidewalk and then throw an impediment right in the middle of it.
Right.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
We believe that was a comment masquerading as a question, Mr. Jordan? Yes, I thought so. Okay, we're still on questions, so. Ms. Schwartz?
Thank you. Well, Mr. Jordan asked some of the questions I had. So what's left, Ms. Carey, for me is to ask you about undergrounding of the poles and wires running along, I think it would be the eastern portion with some of your neighbors. And when we were there on Tuesday at the site visit, I believe I posed that question to you because some of them seem to be on your property and others may be on some of the adjacent neighbors' property.
Yeah, the north property line.
North property line.
I went back and checked on that, and the first three are not on my property. It looks like one is like right on the property line, and then the one back at Hope is not on our property. So we can just use this one, it's fine. So she's referring to along here.
In your outreach to the neighbors, has that discussion, that topic come up?
We started talking about it, and then I had Edison come out, and it really turned out to be really cost prohibitive. I mean, Edison wouldn't even give me an estimate. They said it'd be a waste of my time. I was never going to do it because they would exceed $500,000. The other thing is, you'd have to go on whoops, wait a minute. These have overhead services. You would have to trench through everybody's backyard and go up on their roof, take it off their roof, put a new service on each one of their personal houses, and get you'd have to get an easement from them to Edison on all those to get them in. And I don't own that property. So that's where the problem comes in.
Okay, sounds like it was thoroughly explored.
Yeah, we tried, but it doesn't go very far. Okay. It would be better for us, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet. This is for staff. I don't know who wants to take this one, but this is an annexation. It was initiated by the council in 2008 or 2009. And I know annexations require 2 or 3 findings as far as adequate services, orderly development. Do we get a bite at that apple, or is that something that's always dealt with solely by the council?
Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, certainly you can consider those topics, and those would be the topics that would be appropriate for you to address in your recommendation to the Council. But ultimately, the Council is the body that makes those findings.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, let's get to Planning Commission comments and then a decision on this project. Who would like to start? Mr. Bartlett, you want to start? Or?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think, this applicant has set a great example for how to work with neighborhoods and with the public agencies and all the intricacies involved with our ordinances and codes, and it's not easy doing development these days. There's a lot of things to consider. So I think having an experienced applicant really goes a long way in terms of getting, thorough submittals to us that we know are vetted. So we appreciate the effort that's gone into it. When I went back and really looked at our minutes from 2 years ago when we saw the project, it was basically unanimous. Every commissioner here felt that the lots were too big or that a PUD type development should be explored, and recommended that the applicant come back to the Planning Commission for a concept review. And while I appreciate the outreach to the neighborhood, I think that the applicant has really been silent with the commission for the last 2 years. And our comments from 2 years ago, at least my comments in particular, about the lots being very large. They're 64% larger than the E3 zone that's being proposed for this annexation. And compared to the neighborhood lots, I still find that the lots are large. We could certainly put more housing on this parcel. I really see this as being land wastage. We've got oversized lots, and yet the applicant is asking for a modification to have less than the required street frontage on Lot 8 because all the other lots are too big. So I'm really struggling with trying to find the nexus for necessity with the modifications and, proposing a project with, substantially larger lots, which then translates into down the road, even though the houses aren't proposed at this point, translates into large houses. And I did some calculations based on the net lot areas. The largest lot, number 1, will support, based on the MPO, FAR of a house of 4,177 square feet. That's the largest one. And the smallest, which I think was lot number 7, that house gets down to about 3,800 square feet. So that's the range, 3,800 to almost 4,200. And I really find those house sizes not in keeping with the surrounding single-family neighborhoods, and this is consistent with the comments that were made by 3 out of the 4 commissioners that saw this 2 years ago, and I think Commissioner Jostis was the commissioner that wanted to explore the PRD-type site diagram that maybe wasn't the traditional subdivision, and nothing has come back to the commission since then, even though there's been a lot of neighborhood outreach. And to me, it's still the same 9 lots that were proposed 2 years ago, even though the street has shifted to the north from the south. So I'm having trouble with the extra large lots. They're 64% larger than what the proposed zone is, the 7,000 square foot lots. This is taking the average lot size, which again is going to translate into future large homes, and I think that goes against affordability, and I really see it as land wastage. I think we could do better with this parcel. So I'd like to hear my fellow commissioners' comments, but I have the same opinion I did 2 years ago because it's essentially the same plan with a new street location. Thank you.
Ms. Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me start by saying that I do appreciate the extensive outreach that you've done to the neighbors. I think that speaks volumes about your commitment to being, shall we say, a good developer, good neighbor, and that you have taken so seriously the neighbors' feedback and been responsive isn't lost on me, and I'm sure not lost on the neighbors. I also want to talk about the topography of the property, because here again, I think that what you're proposing in terms of the regrading will improve and actually remedy a long-standing drainage problem that I know has been of concern to some of the neighbors. And so I think we're moving in the right direction there. I want to pick up on something Commissioner Bartlett said, though, because I spent a fair amount of time further this week beyond the site visit in your neighborhood there, and I'm familiar with the Stacy Lane development, and I'm struggling with the scale of the homes on the 9 parcels relative to what most of the neighborhood seems to reflect. I agree with Mr. Lawson, that there is a mix in this neighborhood, but I would have to say, from my observation, the preponderance of the properties would be somewhat, and the homes, the scale of the homes would be somewhat more modest than what you're proposing. So I would like to see for my support a slight adjustment. But in general, I think there's so many positives with the project that I would like to see it just revised in order to scale it appropriately and then move forward if the rest of my colleagues think there's merit for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was unable to get to the site visit. I started out for it in good faith, but there was a big accident on 101 and I just couldn't get there. So I apologize for that. But I've been to this site many times and I went one more time on my own. So I did visit, but not at the organized site visit. And my feelings are no different from Commissioner Bartlett's and Commissioner Schwartz's in terms of, when we ask for a modification, that's anybody, then we also look for a benefit, sort of like it's an opportunity to have a trade-off. When you're asking for the mod, I appreciate that you're improving the drainage and that you have done this superb neighborhood outreach, which is really wonderful. But, perhaps there's a trade-off where we have smaller lots and you don't need that mod. And I have no different feelings other than Commissioner Bartlett's and Commissioner Schwartz's and the flag raised by Commissioner Jordan as well. I feel these lots are very large, could be smaller, and I'd like to see another run at it. I'm really sorry we didn't get a conceptual review, and we get to this point, and this is our first blush, as it were, for this project revision. So I would be supportive of it coming back before I would make a recommendation to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry I raised the flag. So I actually probably fall somewhere a little lighter than what you've heard so far, but I'm very close to the comments of Commissioner Schwartz. I think there's a project here. To me, really, the fault is on the flag I raised, is that unless I'm willing to go out and do the research myself, there's really nothing showing me in the staff report on sizes of lots and houses compared to what you're proposing. And a nice chart that wraps it up and shows me. And those were items that were brought up with the prior commission work. And I think even in those minutes it was mentioned to have a conceptual report, to have a conceptual hearing and move forward. I have no problem with the modification. I'm told that frequently happens on cul-de-sacs where I end up just having a problem getting enough information in front of me is concerning the subdivision, and that's the phrase actually that the parcels are consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. I don't know if they are. I don't know if they aren't. My feeling is that I agree with the rest of my peers that they are dramatically larger than the surrounding neighborhoods, and as we know now, the size of the lot gets to drive the size of the house, and you could accomplish maybe keeping the lots the same if you were willing to come back and offer building envelopes that resolve part of that concern. Other than that, I think all the other recommendations that would go forward to council, I think you're making appropriate improvements. I think it's consistent with the general plan. It's on a site that should be developed. It offers a dedication of public access. For me, if you just resolve that problem on consistency with the surrounding neighborhood, I think I could move forward with the plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with Commissioner Jordan's remarks, although I wonder, given the dimensions of the property being so long and narrow and a 60-foot wide front requirement, whether that is actually possible, but perhaps Mr. Jordan's suggestion of building envelope sizes that go along with the subdivision, I don't know if that's possible. Perhaps that would resolve the issue of houses that seem to be out of scale with the neighborhood. Is that something that could be done, Mr. Lawson or Mr. Cato?
Chair Justice, Commissioner Lodge, that I'm not sure that we would do it as building envelopes, but we certainly have put conditions on previous projects where we limited the size of the house to a certain size, right? We've certainly done something like 3,000 square feet plus a 450 square foot garage. We've done things like that before. The building envelope is a little bit, but usually when we do that, there's a environmental constraint, right? It's a steep hillside or something like that. But we have done it. I don't know if Mr. Vincent's got more to add.
Well, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, I understand that you're struggling with a compatibility issue of the neighborhood, and in part that's driven by the lot sizes. The City Council, in adopting its FAR scale, took its lead and used the lot size as its metric as to what is an appropriate size. Simply because a maximum FAR is out there doesn't necessarily mean that is exactly what's going to be built. Although that's typical, that a property owner does seek to maximize not only their investment but also their opportunities for living the way they want to. You have a number of things out there, and the lot sizes are as they are proposed, and the sitting here now, I'm not the challenge I'm having, or the challenge I'm having to see as far as how the Commission is going to achieve its goal is just picking a square footage limitation. I'm not sure if that's going to help you very much in finding neighborhood compatibility, just because there's a number out there. So those are my thoughts as far as how that particular line of thinking is going.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Ms. Lodge, you have more to add?
Not at this time.
Okay. I guess that leaves it to me to wrap up this first set of comments here. I'm somewhat puzzled. I appreciate the good intentions of my fellow colleagues and wanting to see more density on this project, and the sensitivity towards neighborhood compatibility. I also suspect that the applicants are somewhat surprised by coming in with a project that is consistent with the surrounding zoning in terms of the general lot areas, then complying with the city's requirement for setbacks, slope density, what have you, on a fairly flat and straightforward lot, and then being told it's not dense enough. And that's the issue. That's one of the issues here. I had hoped to see some building envelopes to better get a sense of what types of houses and what the design might be. But with a subdivision, we're not concerned with design. That issue is punted to the single-family design board in this case. And I suspect that is exactly why the applicant came to this body with only a subdivision and an annexation and the modifications that were necessary to get there, because they didn't want to get into that business. And there's pros and cons of doing that. The cons are you're facing some concern on the part of my fellow commissioners as to what we can't predict at this point in time might look like. And I'm not going to attempt to nor modify their viewpoints on this. I came to this meeting looking at this as a fairly standard subdivision, hoping to have seen more, but not getting building envelopes or some of the other things that my colleagues had stated. But I think this is one of those cracks in the process that this project is hurtling towards in terms of a subdivision not giving us, it complying with the requirements of the application process, but not giving us what we'd like to see in terms of what happens after this. And so we're stuck with how to rectify those two issues. I guess the question to my colleagues is, if 9 lots are too few, what would you support in terms of an additional increase in density, and what assurances would need to go along with that so that we send a clear message to the applicant should they, if the commission does have overriding concerns about this subdivision and wants to send them back to the drawing table, because this project has been on in the process for some 2 or 3 years. And so I think that it's got adequate public services, that it represents orderly development in this area. Having been a proponent of concentrating development in areas where there's services, is I can understand the arguments that are being made by some of my colleagues to have more density here. But I'm also concerned that if we go there, all of a sudden now the applicant's got to go back to the neighbors and say, well, I got to put 2 or 3 more units on here. The terrain really starts to change then, and in the meantime we don't get needed housing. I think what we're looking to balance here is to subdivide and develop this property in a manner that meets local community needs for housing. And there's a majority of opinion here that is not convinced that that's going to be the case, because while the 8,000 square foot zoning in the county and the 7,500 square foot zoning in the city resulted in small 900 to 1,800 square foot houses in the neighboring region as it developed in the 50s and 60s, we're in a different time warp here with the cost of housing and the value of land in Santa Barbara. And so there's a concern about having some mansions go up in a place that is different. But I can't make that leap. To me, it's still speculation, because we are restricted to a subdivision here. And I can't find the reason to vote in the negative based upon the findings I'm supposed to make for the subdivision map or the annexation findings in terms of having it a logically developed project in the city on all city services. So I'm going to throw it back to the commission to try to be more direct in what we can do with what our discretion is today in trying to pull something out of the hat here to find something that works for everybody in the room. Ms. Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My interest is in trying to find a way through to support the subdivision and to have the project move forward. So in listening to you, I have one question, unless Mr. Vincent might advise me that this either is irrelevant or for other reasons we shouldn't go there. But the 4,000 square feet in size that's estimated for each development, it includes garage, habitable space, and hardscape, it says here. Does that still ring true in the project description that we have before us? So where I'm going with that question is, I'm wondering if you could sort of parse out the square footage for these other aspects of the development from the main houses themselves, the main structures themselves. Mr. Vincent, you have a furrowed brow, Mr. Vincent, so perhaps you could comment for me.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Schwartz, so your question is trying to have the applicant identify for these lots a certain square footage for the residence, a certain square footage for the garage, and a certain square footage for accessory structures? Is that?
Well, where I'm going with my line of questioning, and this goes back to compatibility with the neighborhood, is the actual size of the home, the proposed size of the homes. We see the 4,000 square feet is all-encompassing, includes the garage, habitable space, and hardscape. I don't know if there's already some sort of plan that's emerging by the applicant of the homes separate from these, the hardscape and garage. I mean, we have some extraordinarily large garages in the city now. I just saw one on the Mesa recently that has a boat in it. So I'm just trying to separate out and think through what my lingering compatibility issue might be, because I'm looking to resolve it to support the project moving forward.
And Mr. Vincent, before you answer that, I'm going to pile on and ask you if there are different compatibility standards for a subdivision as opposed to a development plan. Because in my mind, with a subdivision, you're looking at lot size and lot orientation and the way it works on a flat piece of paper as opposed to a three-dimensional model, which is more applied to development plans and actual architectural review.
Well, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, one comment that I would make just to start this conversation is this lot could have, the applicant could come in not with a subdivision, but ask to build a single residence on this lot. And I would be hard-pressed to say that that wouldn't be compatible with the neighborhood in the sense that it is not violating to do that, would not violate the minimum lot size. It would not violate the street frontage requirements for this zone. In general, the compatibility, the analysis of compatibility with the neighborhood that I've seen by the Commission has been, does it meet at least the minimum standards or greater, as opposed to, we're not getting enough lots out of it and therefore it's not compatible. That's a new one for me. I understand how that's playing out in the sense of the Commission trying to find a compatibility with the ultimate development, with the pattern of development that is existing in the neighborhood, and seeing it from that perspective. But this is the first time that I've seen the Commission struggling with a compatibility of lot sizes when they are meeting the minimum requirements of the proposed zone. And so that's one of the challenges I'm having in advising the Commission with its particular challenge that it has with this project, is that we typically don't struggle when a project exceeds the minimum requirements.
Thank you. Ms. Lodge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Vincent, it sounds as if you're saying there really isn't a way, given that this is an annexation and it's a subdivision, for the Planning Commission to put any kind of condition on it relating to future house size. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
You could do it. Quite honestly, this is an annexation, and you can make your recommendation to the City Council saying, we recommend that the City Council consider this annexation, but we're concerned about the proposed development, and we recommend that there be a maximum structure size. Where you're hearing my hesitancy is that I'm not, that's a pretty blunt tool. In the same way that the FAR is a pretty blunt tool in achieving compatibility on a project-by-project basis, grabbing it and using it and applying it 9 different times in the hopes that on projects and on houses that are yet to be proposed. The challenge there, an example of what I'm talking about would be the commission says no more than 3,000 square feet for any residence in this subdivision. Okay, project goes forward, subdivision goes forward, and the particular property owner's answer to that conundrum is a 3,000 square foot house, but it's 2 stories for some reason. And that 2-story residence now all of a sudden is causing view issues and privacy issues for its adjacent neighbors. You haven't really achieved a compatibility with the neighborhood with that square footage limitation. It's the square footage is in and of themselves. That's the design. I see that the design of these future residences is going to have a greater impact on their compatibility with their neighbors than just a square footage number. And so that's the personal hesitancy I'm having in saying go down that road. This project requires an annexation, and that annexation is a legislative action by the City Council, and they have broad discretion in deciding whether or not this property should come in. The council policies regarding annexation suggest that this property is ripe for annexation, and it should be brought into the fold of the city, and that a county island be removed. But again, they do have broad discretion in determining how and when that will occur.
Well, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Given what Mr. Vincent said, and the fact that I don't see how this land could be subdivided, given the 60-foot requirement, frontage requirement, in a different configuration that would give the 10 lots, for example, with each, with a little less square footage. As a subdivision and a development, I don't have a problem with it. And I could support it, and I would support it with a recommendation to council to consider some method of limiting the house size and toss the question to the city council, where the decision finally remains anyway. And just on one other thing, on the light, there was a request about the lower light poles if this does go forward. I certainly don't have a problem with the 14-foot poles. I think that would be appropriate for a short little residential street like this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cato, I know some of the differences, but could you remind me about the difference between this and the subdivision on San Remo? I know there we were talking about creek setbacks and modifications associated with that, but it still involved a subdivision with a discussion on building envelopes, and there was a significant amount of conversation at that discussion over lack of information on surrounding lot sizes and building sizes too. We saw basically the same thing, a cutoff of an adjacent lot, and people exhibited a desire for more information. But what in a foundation manner separates that discussion with building envelopes from this discussion?
Chair Justice, Commissioner Jordan, the main thing that separates it's that creek, right? It's an environmental constraint. There's the creek, and then there was a setback from the creek. And the question was, when you put that, it was I think it turned out to be a 35 feet setback, and one house, the existing house, was allowed to go into that a little bit because it already existed and it was historic. But it was the constraint of the setback versus the constraint of the limitation of development within the creek that put the box on, right? In this subdivision, there is no environmental constraint, nothing similar to that at all. That starts to constrain the lot.
And that precludes the discussion of such then?
It doesn't preclude it, like Mr. Vincent said, and like I've said before, you can put limitations on house size on if you want. In that case, it was easier because we already had these constraints that were pushing it into a little box.
Okay. Well, I hear everybody's advice, and the last from Commissioner Lodge on the what's going to happen if you put more lots on there and you need 12 modifications for the front lot. And I don't know. I don't know if that's acceptable going down the line either. But I continue to be uneasy with the fact that despite the comment that it meets the required lot square footage of 7,500, it actually exceeds it by time and a half. So it's a minimum, not a maximum. Every one of these is a time and a half over, if not almost twice over for lot number one. And that I think is what drives part of the problem. I don't want to see 15 modifications in there for the front lot mod on each one of those, but I don't see any information in front of me either that says the surrounding neighborhood has a predominance of time and a half size lots for the zoning. And again, this is a conversation I remember really well from San Remo too, as we went off onto the sides of San Remo and said, well, why aren't we being given information similar to what they go through at the Single Family Design Board when they're talking about FARs and how it compares to the neighborhood when you have to make a compatibility finding. So I'm still struggling with that, and you know, I can be pushed if the majority wants to go that way, because I think 12 or 15 modifications is also wrong too. But I still think these lots are too large compared to what I'm shown in the data in front of us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm not sure that Commissioner Jordan really started the firestorm. I think, you know, it really started really 2 years ago, but I think there's a project here. I think we've got a willing and great applicant. I love this neighborhood. I grew up in it. I grew up about a block and a half away from this site. I know it very well, and I do think a subdivision is appropriate for this property. But I think that there's a project that doesn't need modifications. It would shrink some of the other lots other than the one that is requesting the modification to allow that to happen, which I think, you know, would help. It would maybe reduce the future home sizes a little bit more in keeping with the neighborhood. So I think my minimum stance is that the other lots are shrunk enough to allow Lot 8 to be reconfigured such that it didn't need a modification. It would probably still be a 9-lot subdivision. If I was doing it myself, I would choose to take out the extra 12 feet of lot width on the other lots and do a 10-lot project and make more families happy, have more houses that are more affordable to more people. And I think that would be a greater community good, but I can't force the applicant to go there, but I can't support the modification for Lot 8 in its current configuration, and I think there's plenty of ways to get there. I don't want to design it for the applicant. I think in the end, it's going to be a great project, but our only tool in how big these homes are in the future is the size of the lots. I don't feel comfortable defining building envelopes and putting handcuffs on future developers or buyers. I think the MPO has been fully vetted and that those home sizes will be handled by the Single Family Design Board. I don't want to go into their turf, but I think easily you could do 10 lots, and real easy you could do the 9 without a modification. So I think there's a project. I'm just not sure which way the applicant will choose to go from here. I would support the shorter light poles. I think that would benefit the northern neighbors greatly. So that's my feeling.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 10 lots would put it into that inclusionary place, wouldn't it?
I think they're doing in lieu fee anyway. I don't think it changes that.
Well, my understanding is that this is a proposal to subdivide and nothing else at this point, which would be no housing's proposed, and I don't want to get into the purview of the Single Family Design Board. And putting my troubling feelings aside about no concept review and this level coming in, it's straightforward, but they're large, or straightforward and they're large. So, so dealing with what's before us and nothing else, I can come around and support it, although it's difficult for me to do. But I've been out here 3 times over the years, and the proposals have been interesting. Some have been, I can't really remember all of them, but some have been strong and some haven't been as advantageous. So, boy, all my caveats are flashing, and maybe what would help me is if, while we're having the last remnants of this discussion, that one slide would be put up that shows not this neighborhood, but the broader one, if you remember. And I'm sorry it wasn't up throughout the discussion, actually. Not the aerial. Is it the aerial or?
It's a county. It's a county
Yeah,
map.
that's
that
it.
showed all.
That's it. Because that is the big picture there. So we can look at that. And the annexation is very appropriate. It would solve that problem of it being an island of the county having an island in the city. You can see there's some other places. There's some other, as the pointer finds them, other lots. So I can, it's a toss-up for me.
Mr. Cato or Mr. Lawson, if the commission were to entertain a subdivision that was larger than the 9 lots, resulted in more lots than the 9-lot subdivision, say 10 or 11, would there be any substantial change in the environmental impacts that accompany this project compared to a slightly larger project?
Sure, Joseph. Off the top of my head, I believe not. From a traffic standpoint, that would probably be the only one I would think of, but I think trip capacity is adequate up here. The one thing is that right now there's a road being proposed serving the 9 lots of parking on one side. I would have to talk to Public Works about whether that road would have to be widened a little bit more. At what point would it be 10, 11, 12? There's parking on one side right now, no parking on the other side. They may come back and say having parking on both sides. So now we have a right-of-way 60 feet wide. And we still have, compliance with stormwater management, alongside 20-foot setback, 2-car parking. A lot of things you don't see in the neighborhood in some parcels. So I just want to caution there is some non-conforming development to the current ordinance.
Okay. In order to move this forward, and I want to let Ms. Lodge and Ms. Schwartz comment here, my sense is that there is support for moving this project forward. In spite of some of the reservations of the commission regarding what the zoning calls for, given the lot size and orientation, but that with the incorporation of additional comments regarding the light poles being reduced in size and the possibility of other fine-tuning, that there's a project that can be supported based upon the application before us, and if there is interest in expressing flexibility on the side of greater density to increase an additional unit or so, that we set the floor for the subdivision and reflect in our motion where we could see it improving without compromising the ability of this applicant to leave the commission today with some certainty as to what's being approved.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I may have a suggestion, but I'd like to ask staff if it's at all workable. Lot 1 has gross square footage over 17,000 square feet, net square footage of 13,000, close to twice what the 7,500 square foot minimum. If Lot 1 were divided with access for the southerly lot, parcel that you would then have, with access from Lacumba Road, and the lines, since all of the lots fronting onto the new cul-de-sac street are wider than 60 feet, those property lines could be moved over to give greater square footage to what would then be 2 lots fronting on Lacumba. That would gain another lot, and I don't know if is that a possible solution?
I'll let the applicant jump in a minute, but 2 things I just want to point out, Chair Justice Commissioner Lodge. One is that Lot 1 does front on public road and will front on new public road. It will be subject to 2 front setbacks. And so it'll be already a little bit more constrained. This area of Hope Avenue, it should be 30 miles an hour, but I think people do get some speed going. They have a downhill run towards State. And I started thinking of that before you mentioned it, but for a single-family residence, you can or are allowed to back out onto a public road. So I'd be slightly hesitant about encouraging someone to back out onto Hope Avenue, given the fact that there is really not a street where people can go slower, like this proposed public road. So I'll let the applicant jump in.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Carey, please. Okay. And
I'm a little bit in shock. But I think this is a good slide because something just dawned on me. And I've seen this for so long, I didn't look at it like you looked at it. But we fought really hard with the neighbors to have less paving and less hardscape. And so what Peter mentioned is true. Our first condition when we came to you the first time, they wanted a 60-foot right-of-way, sidewalks on both sides, and a parkway on both sides. So we've gotten this negotiated down to 40 feet. So we've picked up 20 feet. So it makes these lots now look bigger because normally this road would be here. So we thought that was a good thing because it brought us more landscape. In answer to your question, we went round and around and around on getting more lots. If you're right, you could get more modifications, but I thought the goal was to ask for the least amount of modifications. So you can't get any more lots. If you start here and you go 60, 60, 60, 60, 60, 60, and you get the fire department turnaround, there's not, if you go with the code, this is the direction I was sent. And that may be why these look larger, but the problem is, they're very, very narrow. They're almost the size of these. They just happen to be deep because we got rid of some of the hardscape in the front. So I guess where I'm a little concerned is I thought the big caveat that most plan agencies have is the word compatibility. And the city is probably the tightest, nicest area you can build in. But you have the FAR rule, which goes by square feet. You have the solar rule where you have to calculate the shadow. You can't throw a shadow on somebody else's house. You have a slope density problem. I had to do a slope test to prove the slope. This lot is being required to be extra large because you see the grades where this pond's in? It can't be a 7,500 foot minimum under your rules. It has to be 1100, but just because of the slope. This is such a strange site. it goes, look how far apart these grades are, and then look what happens in here. This can barely be built on if you go under FAR because of the slopes on that one lot. And so it's kind of peculiar, and I think that's what's governing all these rules coming together at once. So you're going to have, for compatibility, first of all, we went to the Board of Architectural Review for subdivision design, and they're supposed to be the body that looks at compatibility, I believe. And you have to decide what's compatible with the neighborhood. There are 9 existing homes to the north, and we're proposing 9 neighbors beneath them. These people are still in the county, and they have 7 lots to the south, and we're proposing 9 above them. This is my immediate, to me, compatibility to my neighborhood. These were all much larger lots, and over the years they subdivided these and they made them into 2 lots. You can tell because some are still big lots. These lots are the perfect size. They can't be split. In a 7,500 square foot, they can never be split off. They have no other access. By the way, traffic does not want any driveways on Hope Avenue. They won't approve that. And you also have Mr. Anderson's driveway, and you have Lincoln coming out right here. So anything here is considered like not a good thing.
So, Ms. Carey, I understand what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
I interpret that to mean there is a reluctance based upon the direction you have gotten from different city departments to do something of a different design than what we have here.
Yes, my request would be each of these lots, if there's ever a house built or when a house is built, whether I build them or a single other person builds them, has to go through all the municipal codes that are going to check the compatibility of whatever house is designed on that lot. And I should think the ordinances you have in place should go with what's compatible. That's would be my feeling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask, in order to move this forward, I'd like to take straw polls on the annexation, general plan amendment, zoning map amendment, and negative declaration to get a sense, because I think everybody on this commission agrees with all 4 of those recommendations. So I'd like to ask a show of hands in favor of the, Mr. Bartlett.
Could you add the findings for the modification as well to the list?
I'll get to that. I just hadn't turned the page yet. I'm going to go one by one.
Okay.
Is everybody in concurrence with the annexation? Okay.
Yes.
Yes? Yes? Okay. Is everybody in concurrence with the recommendations for the general plan amendment?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Is everybody in concurrence with the zoning map amendments? Yes. Yes, reluctantly, but we've got 6 hands up here. Okay. Final negative deck operation. It's a standard negative declaration. Everybody okay with that? Okay. We're still in consensus here. For the modification to allow a decreased front right-of-way.
Yes. Frontage.
Frontage. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Bartlett, you have a concern with that. What is the concern? And how can we rectify that concern based upon the project in front of us?
I can't find the necessity for Lot 8 to have a 38-foot lot frontage when the other 8 lots, on average, exceed their minimum lot width by 13 feet each.
Okay. Then on the tentative map, with the condition that the light poles are reduced from 20 to 14 feet, what level of concurrence do we have with that? Okay, all in favor?
All in favor.
Okay, and Mr. Jordan, are you okay with that? So the only issue is the modification. Okay. Mr. Bartlett, would you like to propose something differently so we can take an action that might incorporate your thing without alienating the rest on the commission? I'm trying to get to consensus here. You have the floor. What should we do differently with this subdivision?
I think the minimum that could be done with this would be to narrow up the conforming lots just enough to bring Lot 8 into the minimum frontage standard of 60 feet. And so that would be probably an average of about maybe a 2.5 to 3 foot shrinkage on the other remaining lot widths.
Okay. Ms. Carey or someone from Mac Design, is there somebody who can address the question that Mr. Bartlett has?
I'm going to address it from a planning standpoint. I'm opposed to that because these lots are then going to be longer and more narrow. And now you have to design long, narrow houses that step down the slope, where I would prefer that they be a more livable house and the house be up, at the top and have usable backyards and have long slivers on a big square footage lot like that. I don't think that's the best interest. They're already long and narrow. They're going to become longer and skinnier narrow. So I am not for that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to entertain a motion for a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council regarding the annexation of general plan minutes and the zoning amendment. Is there a motion on
Move
to be made?
their approval.
Okay. We have a motion by Mrs. Lodge. Is there a second?
Second.
We have 3 seconds. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Do we have a recommendation of making the findings for the final negative declaration? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Lodge, second by Ms. Larson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. On the modification, is there a motion for the modification as proposed?
Move to approve the modification
Is there,
with a comment that if what was done, as Commissioner Bartlett suggested, would result in lot 8, I believe it is, being really huge.
okay, could you clarify that one more time? It's a motion to approve.
Just forget the side comment.
Okay.
The motion is
Mr.
to
Chair.
approve the modification.
I'm playing along here. I'm concerned now that we're getting down to the project-specific attributes, particularly
Yes.
the modification.
Right.
To approve the modification in a vacuum, in other words, not knowing exactly what this subdivision is going to look like,
Right.
is I'm seeing that problematic. We've
Okay.
got it. You've got a negative declaration for the annexation. We've seen a layout and so forth, but to approve a modification without understanding completely of the moving parts associated with that modification, I think is problematic at this point. And so I'd like to hear where the commission's headed at that point.
Mr. Vincent, I think we should entertain a final motion on the modification and the tentative subdivision map based on the presumption that the City Council approves the annexation, general plan amendment, and zoning amendment. Is that copacetic with regard to process that you're comfortable with?
Yes, I think you've already made your you've made the necessary actions. You've approved the negative declaration.
Right.
You've agreed in consensus to recommend the annexation, and with the necessary findings to make the general plan amendments and the zoning ordinance amendment. I think that I'm recommending that you take the tentative map and any necessary modifications together.
That was my intent.
Okay.
In entertaining a motion from somebody on the commission
Mr.
other
Chair,
than myself.
I
Ms.
I
Lodge.
move to approve the tentative subdivision map and the modification on street frontage.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. There was some reference to the 14-foot light standard. Was that incorporated into any of your motion?
Well, I don't know if this is the appropriate place, but I would certainly make it, if it is,
Mr. Cato.
Chair Joseph, our understanding is that our Public Works Department really does not want the 14 feet. They really want the 20 feet. They think that the 20 foot is the appropriate height for light standards on a public street. The 14 feet are more for pedestrians, as I understand it. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
The project was reviewed by Public Works, and that was the feedback they got. The applicant received from Public Works is 14 foot is pedestrian.
So it's the nature of this the street on which the standards front.
Correct.
That's driving the issue.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Lodge, would you restate a motion
Well,
here? Is it just the one you just made?
Yes, the one, I think perhaps we should handle the light poles separately.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the modification on the street frontage and the tentative subdivision map.
Okay, any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
So
Mr.
just so I understand, that would be the modification is listed in the staff report without any further adjustments, right?
That's what the motion says.
Okay, thank you.
Did we get a second on that?
Well, I'll reluctantly do it. You know, 20 foot versus 14, I'm hearing from everybody in the neighborhood that the 20,
Okay,
but
we're gonna-
I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead.
Ms.
I'll
Schwartz, we're
second
going to deal with the light standards separately. This is just on the subdivision
Then
map.
I'll second. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-2. Did you say no?
You said no.
Okay, motion fails, 3-3. 3-3. Motion fails. So, where do we want to go? Mr. Jordan.
So I'm confused about the reluctance to lose 2 feet or 2.5 feet off of each of the project frontages, but I don't really know. I don't really have a basis to answer that on. So I'm wondering if you're looking around the neighborhood for similar sized lots, what a typical frontage measurement would be on a lot of a 7,500 square foot lot. I mean, I'm trying to get a finger on whether that's really unworkable, as the applicant says, or if it's a reasonable accommodation to ask for.
Chair Justice, Commissioner Jordan, I mean, I don't think we've done a survey of the whole neighborhood to be able to answer that with data to back it up. But 60 foot is the standard minimum. Most of those lots meet the minimum. Cul-de-sacs are a special situation, though, because you can't, there's just not enough length of the frontage to meet up with the amount of lot area that you have. This is the reason that we recommended that you approve the modification. If they were asking for smaller, shorter lot frontages on the straight lots, we wouldn't be recommending that.
No, but there's 11 plus feet on every lot to give back to get that 38 up to 60.
No, well, I mean that's
Like, so really my question is a 68-foot frontage measurement on a residential lot in this type of neighborhood more of a normal, or is it a burden to place on the applicant?
Sure, Justice Commissioner Jordan. If I could bring your attention to the slide, to the right of the slide, there's actually a series of cul-de-sacs all the way down to the south. And every one of them you see the same situation where very narrow at the cul-de-sac, widening out. So in terms of the neighborhood compatibility, this kind of design is not out of character. And I think the point I heard someone make is you take that one lot and you widen it up to meet the ordinance, you start making that lot really big, potentially. So those are two items to consider. It's all over here. Even to the left of the map, cul-de-sacs all have some pretty narrow frontages for one lot.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lodge.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask a question of Commissioner Jordan, what what do you see as the advantage to having that lot having the 60-foot frontage, and and narrowing the others? I mean, what is the advantage to the subdivision as a whole?
I'm actually hoping just to bring Mr. Bartlett along with me. So, but to me, there's such a glaring difference, and I'm going on faith right now that that's a common occurrence in a cul-de-sac, not to scale, and combining that with what has already been a reluctance agreement with the subdivision decision, because I have acquiesced to a lot that's time and a half a size as getting to the subdivision. And I just, as you continue to ask for more and more, it just builds on the discomfort level. But I don't have any answers to really does a loss of 2.5 feet really adversely affect the lot and the development potential, or is it just something that gets us back to not needing a modification? That's one less thing that needs approval, and we move on.
Okay. Mr. Cato, looking to the interests underlying the condition or the standard of having 60 feet of street frontage on lots in this zone or residential zones in the city in general, is that to provide for adequate on-street parking? Is it to allow for appropriate fire access? What is the underlying intent behind the standard?
Chair Jordan, I think it has more to do with access to the lot than anything else. Access and how do you say this? Sort of neighborhood viewability. You know, I mean, we don't want all flag lots in the city, if you know what I mean. You know, there's some value to having the house being viewed by the street, right? I think it has mostly to do with those two things, right? Pedestrian, vehicular, and emergency access, plus kind of a sense of neighborhood. That's my feeling about it.
Okay. Has anybody on the commission who voted in the negative heard new information that might lead them to a different conclusion? Ms. Lodge, your light is on.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm calculating here. Not ready yet.
Okay. Okay, so no one has heard any new information, and we are deadlocked. Let me ask the commission this. Do you see any value in a near-term continuance to get more details from the applicant that would more clearly articulate the trade-offs associated with creating lots that are more extreme in their rectangular nature as a trade-off for getting more street frontage on Lot 8? Because that's what it comes down to. That's the trade-off, as far as I can tell. Let's start with Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be open for a continuance for a quick study. I mean, it shouldn't take very long to run that analysis, and hopefully we could get it back onto our agenda shortly.
What are the questions you need answered in that analysis?
Well, I think just different revised diagrams that would show conforming, all 9 lots conforming without the modification request.
Okay. Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the discussion the portion of the discussion where the applicant came forward and talked about potential for developing on away from slopes and things like that. I mean, it would be really helpful if you did a study that shaded out parts of the lot that was not able to be developed, to help knit it into understanding you don't have to do it at this minute, but I'm just saying, it's just it just would be helpful to me, and maybe even to city council to study that. Sure.
That's not exactly what I meant. It's not that it can't be developed, but under the ordinance, the slopes dictate how big the lot has to be in the FAR. And I just want to show you something. We did try this. I don't need to sketch it and come back. I've done that. If this becomes 60 feet, in theory, this lot would go down here and catch up someplace down here, and this would become a really big lot. Right now, it's like 11,000 something. So it's going to go to 13,000 square feet or something. And then you would skinny up all these. Then this one's going to need a modification, because when you move this over, it's going to be on this curve here. Otherwise, you're going to need a modification over here. I can't move this up because there's a drainage, got to get out to here. Believe me, I would have come in with no modification if I could have. It just turns out mathematically, when you get this done, back in here you run into this problem. So you might as well average this out. We made these fairly equal. And I tried to get this lot, because it has a double setback, I moved this over. That's the only reason that's a little bit bigger. The problem here is they're long and narrow, and it's a very difficult site dimensionally. I mean, I would not want a modification if I could help it.
Thank you, that's helpful. Mr. Jordan. Oops. No, Ms. Lodge.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good. No.
Anybody? Ms. Larson.
You know, Mr. Chair, I would be willing to get this to City Council. If we're having this much angst amongst our decision makers here, so my suggestion is that well, I'll tell you what I will do to move it along.
Could you put it in the form of a motion?
No. That's not my particular talent. My talent is to be able to say, sure, somebody can make a motion and I'll vote for it. I hate to say that, but it's true. It's my admission of my weak Achilles heel. But anyway, I'm willing to reconsider my vote to help this get to City Council. I think I am sure the applicant has studied this inside, outside, and upside down for getting the most useful configuration, although I have no doubt that Mr. Bartlett could, in a very short time, also do some studies. It's not my talent either. But anyway, so
could
we
we get
need
to
a
the point
motion.
here?
I'm trying. So do we have to have a motion of reconsideration?
No, the motion failed. I'm looking for a new motion
Okay.
or
Well, then
a modified motion.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve. We're at the subdivision map, right? Because I'm kind of lost as where we are.
And the modification.
Yeah.
Taken in tandem.
Oh, here it is. Thanks. Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the subdivision map and approve the modification request.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion. Mr. Jordan?
Well, I'll just make my comment back to additional study, even though there's been a motion. And what would have moved me past the modification would have been still addressing some of my unease about the size of the lots in comparison to the neighborhood. Since it doesn't look like we're going that direction, and you will have your 4 votes to move this along for further discussion, for the same reason, I would not support the motion moving forward, but I think we've moved it along. Thank you.
Okay. For the question, all in favor of the motion is made, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-2. This project is appealable to the City Council within 10 days. Ms. Lodge, did you have any additional direction or comment that you wanted to add to this project as it goes forward?
I did want to go back to the issue of the height of the light poles. This is a very short street that's serving, a narrow street that is serving a few houses. Yes, it's a public street, but it's not a typical public street. And I know Public Works may prefer the 20 feet, but I'd like to see the Planning Commission direct that they be 14 feet, and I would so move.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And as I've said before, the project is appealable to City Council in 10 days. Thank you very much. And at this point, we're going to take a 15-minute recess to allow staff to prepare for our next agenda item. session to respond to the next project, which is an application of Trish Allen for the Santa Barbara Children's Museum for a project located at 125 State Street. Mr. Cato, Ms. Busk.
Allison DeBusk, our project planner, will be giving the staff presentation.
Mr. Busk.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Jostis and Commissioners. The proposed project involves the construction of a new 16,691 square foot building for use by the Children's Museum of Santa Barbara. The project includes 2 on-site parking spaces and 22 parking spaces off-site. The project site is located at 125 State Street in the city's waterfront area. The site is bounded by the railroad tracks to the north, State Street to the east, and Kimberly Avenue to the west. The buildable site area, which is shown with the white outline, is approximately 1/2 acre and is currently vacant. The larger project site, which is outlined in blue, includes the Signalman's building, which is also currently vacant. This is a view of the project site from State Street. You can see the Signalman's building on the right-hand side and an existing hotel on the left. This is a view of the site from Kimberly Avenue. The Signalman's building is now on the left and the existing hotel is on the right. The discretionary applications requested by the applicant are 3 zoning modifications, 1 for the front setback along State Street, 1 for the front setback along Kimberly Avenue, and 1 for parking. And I'll go into more detail on those modifications in just a moment. The applicant is also requesting a coastal development permit for development in the coastal zone and a development plan for the new building. And for that development plan, 5,106 square feet are requested as community priority square footage, which will require a final allocation by the City Council. This slide gives a visual depiction of the front setback modifications that are requested. The required setback in the HRC2 zone is 20 feet for a building that is taller than 15 feet, such as this one. The project is proposing to locate ADA access ramps, bike parking, and a trash enclosure within these 20-foot front setbacks. Staff is supportive of these modifications due to the constraint of having 2 street frontages on this property. Also, the site's location in a flood zone, which requires that the finished floor be elevated and therefore requires access ramps to get to that first floor of the building. And also the relatively minor nature of the improvements that they're proposing within the setback. With regard to the project's parking, they are proposing 2 handicap accessible spaces on the project site and 29 spaces that would be located off-site in the depot parking lot. The city's typical parking requirement for a commercial development is 1 space per 250 square feet, which in this case would require 67 parking spaces. Due to the uniqueness of this use, a parking demand study was prepared for the project to determine its specific anticipated parking demand. That parking study determined that 13 to 26 parking spaces would be required on weekdays, with a peak parking demand of 31 parking spaces on weekends. Therefore, a parking modification is requested to reduce their parking from 67 spaces to 31 spaces. For the 29 spaces that would be located in the depot parking lot, an off-site parking agreement would be required. The depot lot has a total of 158 parking spaces, and data that we have for the depot lot from the year 2010 shows that the lot is on average 30% full on weekdays and 60% full on weekends. This means that there are approximately 68 vacant parking spaces during the weekend, which is adequate to accommodate the 29 spaces required by the museum. Also, as you can see on this exhibit, the depot lots are located approximately 250 to 800 feet from the museum entrance on State Street. In addition to the modification requests that I just discussed, some of the key issues associated with the project include historic resources, views, and design review. The project site contains the Signalman's building, which was constructed in 1910 as part of the train depot. This building was originally used to house lockers and a bathroom for members of the train crew. However, it has been vacant for more than 30 years. The building is a character-defining feature of the Santa Barbara Train Depot Complex, which is on the National Register of Historic Places. No changes to the Signalman's building are proposed as part of the project, and the new Children's Museum building would be set back 16 feet from this Signalman's building. A historic structures report was prepared to analyze the project's potential impacts on the Signalman's building, and it was concluded that the project will not materially alter or damage the Signalman's building or the physical characteristics that convey its historical significance. These are some views of the project site and some photo simulations of the new project. Because the site is currently vacant, the project will affect existing mountain views from Kimberly Avenue. However, these existing views are enjoyed by a relatively small number of people because Kimberly Avenue is not a major transportation corridor. In addition, the view is currently impeded on either side by either vegetation or existing development. Therefore, these views are not considered to be important public scenic views, and the project can be found consistent with local coastal plan and conservation element policies that are targeted towards protecting scenic views. Due to existing development, mountain views from the railroad depot would not be affected by the project as shown in this visual simulation. And views of the project site from State Street do not contain important visual resources, therefore impacts to views would be minimal. The project was reviewed by the Historic Landmarks Commission on 4 separate occasions. Most recently, on May 11th, 2011, and the HLC at that time made findings that the project's size, mass, bulk, and scale were appropriate for the site and that the project was compatible with surrounding development. Staff determined that the project is categorically exempt from environmental review as an urban infill project because it will not have a significant adverse effect on the environment. In conclusion, staff finds that the project is appropriate for the neighborhood, is compatible with adjacent development, and is consistent with the general plan and local coastal plan. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project and recommend approval of the final community priority designation to the City Council. This concludes staff's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Busk. At this point in time, I'd like to invite the applicant to come up to the podium and make a 15-minute presentation. I know you'd always like to have more time, but you're also aware that the Commission may have some questions of your consultants, and that will come at some point
Yes,
during
Mr.
the
Chair.
process.
Thank
so
you.
if you could be focused with your comments.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Suzanne Elledge, Planning and Permitting Services. Very happy to be here today representing the Children's Museum of Santa Barbara. How often is it that we get to focus our attention on a project that is exclusively for children and families? It's very gratifying and it's a satisfying thing and exciting to have the prospect of the museum here in Santa Barbara. I want to, at the outset, acknowledge the city for offering the lease to the Children's Museum on this project site because it prioritizes children in our, excuse me, I have a cold. It prioritizes children in our community, and it also really made this project feasible. We also would like to express our appreciation for the ongoing collaboration that we've had with the city throughout contract negotiations and the application process. We do have a 15-minute presentation for you today. 3 members of our team will be making the presentation. Architect Barry Burkus, landscape architect Susan Van Atta, and senior planner from my office, Trish Allen, will be reviewing special features of the project along with the benefits to our community. As just a brief reminder of what the project is all about, I'd like to introduce a young man who wants to make a statement to you, and then we'll kick it off with Barry. This is Mr. Alex Bolag.
Bolag?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Alex Bolag, and I am 13, and this is my little sister Lila, who is 5. The Children's Museum is going to be a big step forward the city because it will be for the kids, teens, and families of Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara needs a cool new place like the Exploratorium in San Francisco, and we need something new and a bit more stimulating. I'm already a volunteer for the Children's Museum, and I hope my first job will be there. I'd love to work there after school and on the weekends. Our city needs this Children's Museum. Families want it, teens want it, and kids want it. We want a place to not only have fun, but to explore and engage our minds. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burkus?
It says 2:22. What do I do with that? Reset. I think I get about 4 minutes.
Then take it.
Chair, members of the commission, it's an honor to be here today. And as an architect, I can't think of a greater legacy than leaving a building for the children that's a playground for the mind and also for the brain and also for every part of the body when they walk through this building. The building before you today is a collaboration of the city, its consultants, the architects, and the people who are doing the interiors on this, who are great, Creative Machines and Gyroscope. I've worked 6 years on this building, both on this site and the site that was previous to this, and that's all been pro bono, and hopefully this comes to a project that we can begin to go forward with. Before I started on this, I was concerned about the railroad, and I met on site with the railroad in July '07, in January '08, asking the questions of how we could be the safest building we could be next to the railroad. There was no concerns on their part, and we did a lot of talking about how we designed the walkways entering from a distance away from the rails, and the children would be coming either on buses 4 times a week, 2 buses, and going on the backside on Kimberly, or they'd be walking up from the beach with parents, most likely not walking alone. I would say that the core objective of this museum, which is the board's core objective, is to be a foundation of science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And then learn how to learn, which is what the universities are saying today to all of us. It will teach those to be responsible as stewards of the future, not just environment, but of the future. Together with the environmental consultants from UCSB, who are going to be the Bren School Environmental Efficiency Institute, the building will be built to its highest green standards, and the core of the building will be open to the children and the public to see how a building responds to the people within and responds to its own mechanical and structural systems. We think that's going to be something that's exciting. For years, I'm the longest sitting member of the trustees at the university. I've wanted more town and gown, and Arts and Lecture has done a great job. This will be the second big move of bringing the sciences to the street. I look forward to another building or something that's going to give more and more innovative spirit of Santa Barbara to our community. So the Children's Museum is going to be a building that all of us, I think, can enjoy. I'm going to make sure that I put these in the right sequence. The site, as you see, next to the rail, facing on State Street with Kimberly in the back. And Kimberly is our loading and unloading through a second courtyard, which I'll explain to you in a couple of minutes. And the building itself, as we see it, reflects the idea of the beach and the Paseo and the Pueblo area. And the fact that Pueblo Viejo is a really important part of Santa Barbara's architecture, the building will speak to that issue. So as we go forward and look at this lead building, one of the things we will see in this building is big openings and small openings, children and adults. What I've done is take the windows and the openings and let the children have a window their size. So when they're standing on the floor, a window might be a 4.5-foot head. The adults have the larger windows. The front door, as you see that archway, there's a door that's full height for the adults and a little 4-foot door for the children to move through. So it's their building. And when I went to HLC, I told them the most important thing to me is that the children's building, not yours. And that as they look at it, they say, don't you come in my building. I'm here, this is my building, to have fun in and learn. So that's what we did. And I'm not so sure that it bounced correctly the first time it bounced, but it did the second and third and fourth. The building responds to Gaudi's architecture in Barcelona, of the broken plates, the mosaic, and the sand tower. And the tower on the right side of the building is really is a sandcastle tower from the beach. And it also is this place on top that has an oculus in it, with a George Rhodes sculpture inside of it. That's a circular stairway that takes you to the second floor. And then when you're on the roof, and I'll explain that in a minute, you're able to really look all over the city from that. So I've stated that we're 4 days a week. The children will arrive in the back on Kimberly. There'll be children with their parents walking up from the beach, most likely, from the motels and hotels. Probably very little traffic coming from the other side. As we look at the piece that's along the rail, it was important to us to have that step back. Even though it made the building more expensive, we wanted to have hanging gardens and a green roof to show the community arriving on the train and also looking at the building that Santa Barbara is a green city. It also is a city that cares about its building forms. So by stepping back, we relieve that tension against the railroad. We also put a 6-foot barricade along the railroad so that as we developed the Placida, that we could come to the building, sit outside, look at the trains, and end up being in an area that is safe and away from the trains and enjoys the Sigelman's building and the open vistas to the train as it arrives and departs. The back of it, we felt very important that that breaks down to scale, and we did a 1-story small circular element in the center of these two forms so that the entertainment space outside the building is contained in this courtyard. So looking at it, we also created a paseo that went directly from Kimberly through to State Street. So now there is a way to walk between the two without having to climb over the tracks or go through brush. So in the building, the important thing to us to start out with was develop the barrier here for safety. We're asking for modifications so that we can put a ramp system that starts far away from the tracks up and then put a staging area outside the building, open the front doors and look right through to an area that might have puppet, might have small performances on it, a large outside deck with glazed walls that open up to it so that indoor-outdoor relationship, moving the exhibits in and out, work very well. So that the first floor of the building is mostly display, exhibits, learning centers, and entrances from both sides of the building. Inside the building will be creative machines and Gyroscope doing some of the most exciting exhibits that you'll ever see in your life. I toured many, many children's museums before we started this, and the ideas that we saw in those museums didn't come to a level of what we're doing here. On the second level, we took the building, created a small theater, which will end up being an interactive space, a lot of open space around the courtyard with a floating bridge over the top of the lower courtyard, and then decks that look over the train, because when the train comes, I want the children to run to the windows and acknowledge the fact that the train is there. We're not trying to hide it. We're trying to say that it's about transportation, it's about math and learning, but a train is a big part of this building. And then as you look at the exhibits once again, they're going to be highly of science and of fun. And on the roof, and I'm going to give this now to the landscape architect, Susan Vandetta, but we held all the roof decks back so that there was a garden that protected the children from getting close to the outside perimeter walls. And it created a place where the public can have evenings overlooking the city. But it becomes a building for everybody, the children and their parents, a bonding of the family, but also of community that can use this building as a place to gather. Susan?
Thank you. Does it say 10 minutes and 12 seconds?
That's how much time we've taken so far.
Ooh, okay. I'll be quick. Well, our office had a lot of fun with this project, and it would take me quite a bit of time to describe all the thinking that went into all the activities and environmental mitigation that occur in the landscape on this site. But this is our landscape plan, which takes a big advantage of the roof. As you can see, we've got roof gardens, and I can answer questions about that later. And but other than that, we looked at the environment, the El Estero that used to occur here and all that, and we're working with that as a theme with waves and taking stormwater through the site. We have gardens on the roof. We have chaparral environments, sometimes called the elfin forest, as an educational theme in the planting. We have a mission garden landscape down at the street level, again, ties in very nicely, is educational and also reflects El Pueblo Viejo. Silvery rainwater gardens run through the site and teach about stormwater, about we take best advantage of the rainwater as it falls on the site.
We have fun gardens such as succulents used to simulate a coral reef landscape. And then Barry was talking about the kinds of mosaics and all that we would include. And one example of a fun activity that we have is that you see them in the upper right-hand corner, a water pump merry-go-round. And the idea behind that is that kids could play on a merry-go-round and then create a pump and watch the water that we'd collected in cisterns from rain pump through the landscape. Just one of the many ideas that we have for the landscape. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to go very fast.
Trish, don't sacrifice content in sake of time, because I know this is an important project.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Well, to start, I want to acknowledge staff. Staff did a very thorough staff report and analysis along with our project description letter that go along with the staff report as an attachment, and went over all the particulars in terms of the development standards, the general plan policies, policies related to the coastal development permit, and also covered CEQA very well. So I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about the Children's Museum, the public benefits, the community priority aspects of the project. We understand that the Children's Museum, its mission and its goals are absolutely aligned with the intent and purposes of a community priority project. A community priority project needs to meet a present or projected need directly related to public health, welfare, and safety. And I want to touch on some of those aspects that the museum has been working on since they started working on this idea for the museum. Now, this is evidenced also by a unanimous vote by our city council to designate the project as a community priority. And as Suzanne mentioned in her opening comments, this has been a collaborative effort with the City of Santa Barbara, the redevelopment agency at the time, to come forward and offer this as a project site for our community. So some of the public benefits. The museum is going to provide our community with a unique educational resource. There are activities that will be offered that are not typically offered and available in most classrooms that we have. They have established relationships with many youth-serving agencies in our community. One example would be the Boys and Girls Club. In my project description letter, you'll see a long listing of others, and I didn't even cover them all. And I think you've received quite a few letters of support from these agencies as well, and I believe a lot of those folks are here sitting behind me. The museum will offer free admission to these youth groups. Middle school students will have the ability to earn their required community service credits so that they can move on to the next level. High school students that qualify will also be eligible for paid positions as staff. I think Alex is going to be one of the first. The museum will be fully bilingual. That was something I just learned this week while we were preparing for today. The museum will provide support for schools and teachers. Title I schools will be eligible for discounted field trip programs. Those school children that visit the museum with their schools or with their youth groups, they will also be offered free admission passes, and then they can come back with their families. Students at Santa Barbara City College, UC Santa Barbara, can also earn credits through internships offered by the museum. Now, the location is key. We can use some vitality on our lower State Street and in our waterfront area. And this museum is so aligned with all the goals and policies of the coastal zone and our visiting service, serving needs. The museum will draw visitors to our waterfront. They will frequent our hotels, our restaurants, and our other businesses, and I think really bring this synergy happening to the waterfront. Sheila Cushman, the executive director, was explaining to me a diamond. There's a diamond in our waterfront area, and the Children's Museum fulfills that final point of the diamond, if you will, between the zoo, the wharf, the Sea Center, the Maritime Museum, and the Children's Museum. And that's what we want people to come to our city, come to our downtown, and be able to visit all these wonderful cultural and recreational opportunities that are present. Again, Barry and Susan have touched on the building itself, the landscaping, the design, the exhibits are intended to be a community model for environmental sustainability. Today, we're very excited to be here. We have a lot of people that have been waiting for this day to come. We feel really that we've put together an amazing project. We're looking for your positive support to approve the project, the development plan, the coastal development permit, the zoning modifications, and maybe even, I don't know if we need a recommendation for the final community priority designation, but we feel that we've put a really excellent package together, and hope you feel all our excitement here today. Our project team is here behind me to answer any questions you may have. I know there was some at the site visit. There's not time to work all that into the presentation, given the limited time. Maybe some of those questions have been answered by our presentation or in review of the staff report since we saw you on Tuesday. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. At this point in time, I'm going to open up the public portion of the meeting, and we have close to 20 people who have indicated they are interested in speaking. And we're going to ask that people try to hold their comments to about 2 minutes. And I'm also going to ask that you listen closely to the comments of others, because if they have covered a topic or a perspective that you also hold dear to your heart, we'd appreciate, in the interest of brevity, that you just acknowledge that they have covered the issue that you wanted to communicate as well, because we're going to have about 45 minutes worth of public comment, and then I want to make sure that the commission has enough time to ask questions of staff and to ask questions of the applicant before we get into the deliberations on the project. So our first speaker is going to be Jill Levinson, and she will be followed by Dr. David Cash. And if you could, if you're following a speaker I've called up, if you could come up behind the microphone so that we can expedite this process, it'd be really helpful. Ms. Levinson.
Thank you. Thank you. I am Jill Levinson, and I'm very proud to be the president of the board of the Children's Museum. I'm also a mom of 3 kids, age 6, 9, and 3 years old. A couple of them are here today, supporting us. I also grew up in Santa Barbara, so Santa Barbara is important to me. I came back 11 years ago to raise my family, and I looked around and I said, where is the Children's Museum? We are missing, our wonderful, wonderful town is missing a key asset for families. So I have been working really hard, along with an amazing board of directors, to bring that asset to Santa Barbara. And if you would all wave, whoever's a board member, so that everyone can, thank you. They've been working very diligently, along with an amazing team of consultants, some of whom you've heard from today. And also, we have a network of almost 100 ambassadors who are parents, teachers, and community members who are supporting us and, frankly, are just waiting for our doors to open. They can't wait. So we're very grateful to have all that support. We've also begun, you should know, the silent phase of our capital campaign. We need to have the money to actually build this building, if you let us. And we have a key lead donor already during the silent phase, a 7-figure donor. And we have many other large donors just waiting in a queue. They want to know what you have to say, so they're waiting for your approval. Today's an important day for us, and we hope very much that you'll allow us to continue to bring this significant project to Santa Barbara.
Thank you. Mr. Cash, to be followed by Sergio Villa.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Cash. I'm the superintendent of the Santa Barbara Unified School District, and I'm here to ask you to move this along as quickly as possible with all urgency. There really is nothing more important happening in K-12 education at this particular point than science, technology, engineering, math, and art. A museum like this is going to provide for our children in our community an asset that we simply can't provide in a public school system. It's going to provide an enormous educational opportunity, a giant classroom for kids and parents to be able to utilize and explore in order to engage them in activities that's going to really enlarge their mind and hopefully ultimately strengthen our community. And The reason why this needs to be done urgently is because we're simply falling behind, and it's not through the fault of great teachers in our schools, it's through the fault of the system that we have. In a building like this, in a museum like this, we're going to be able to do things that we simply can't do in the classroom. And finally, I would leave you with the following comment. I ask children all the time as the superintendent of schools, what do you want me to do? And here's what I hear consistently from children. I want you to act like the future matters. And I would say, why? And they would tell me, because I am the future. And I would ask that you do the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Villa will be followed by Jeremy Tesmer.
Good afternoon. My name is Sergio Villa, and I'm currently a board member and the secretary of the Children's Museum. My wife is Annie Villa. She's a third grade teacher here in our Santa Barbara School District, and I have a 2-year-old son named Micah. I grew up in South Central LA, which in an area with many people would consider to be a very tough neighborhood. I was considered to be one of those at-risk youth, and had a very low-income family, and as a result of it, had very few resources growing up, not just myself, but my brother and my sister. I went along to be the first, in not just my immediate, but my extended family to attend a 4-year university, and then go on to get a master's degree. Currently have a financial planning business here in Santa Barbara. And the reason why I say that is because I cannot say that I attribute those milestones in my life to one particular incident or event, but truly I attribute those milestones and successes in my life to the nonprofit agencies, to the organizations just like the Children's Museum that at one point in my path made out and inspired me and showed me that learning is fun, that education is important, and that I could do something with my life that was different. Now, I joined the Children's Museum Board about 4 years ago, and the main reason was because I was extremely excited that we were going to work countlessly with multiple agencies, not just to duplicate what's already being done, but to truly work together and collaborate and find ways of maximizing the opportunities to reach our youth. I'm personally invested and want to make this museum a museum that is not only welcoming to the Latino community, but a museum that is inviting the Latino community. We have engaged not only over 50 nonprofit agencies, but we've begun engaging the Latino community to ask them for their input, because we value that. And we've taken their input. We've taken some of what they've said and said, hold on for a second, we need to implement this right away. And one of those things is making sure that this museum is fully bilingual. I'm proud of the fact that our board has truly embraced the fact that if we're going to be a museum of the community, it should be built by the community. I can't thank you enough for taking this time to review our request, and I hope that you help us to get things going and move along to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tesmer will be followed by David Tisdale.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Jeremy Tesmer, and I work at Sullivan Goss, but more importantly, I live in the West Beach neighborhood. I've lived at 114 Chapala Street for about the last 7-8 years. Sheila Cushman came to me with the plans for this project, and I had a lot of concerns as a neighborhood member, and she addressed all of them. In fact, it was evident to me in that meeting that she had already met with people from the neighborhood and had worked to address their concerns before soliciting my support. I want to say that I look forward to the development of an imaginative, family-friendly, and environmentally sensitive building. I want you to think, when you consider your vote, what kind of offering you want in the Lower State Street area. I think this is the kind of project we want down there, something that brings international students at the hostel, together with the wine people, together with the Children's Museum, and creates a sort of rich, diverse local offering. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is David Tisdale, and Patricia, my wife, and I have lived here in Santa Barbara for 45 years. Our children have lived here, as well as our 5 grandchildren. Our grandchildren now are getting ready to enter college. I wish that they had the opportunity to visit and experience the wonderful, stimulating learning environment that this Discovery Museum will provide to children of today as well as tomorrow. It will emphasize science, technology, electronics, and mathematics through interesting educational interactive displays designed to spark curiosity and interest. The development of these skills in these areas is critically important and needed for a competitive workforce for tomorrow, and I'm sure you're all aware of that. We encourage you to support this project so Santa Barbarans and all those outside of this area that have shown interest can take advantage of this learning program for young minds. This is a win-win-win endeavor. The museum wins by achieving its goals. The city wins by increased economic activity in the lower State Street and beach area. And most importantly, the children win by having a quality learning facility that is educational and fun to go to.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Judy Riker, to be followed by David Austin.
Good afternoon. I'm Kay Mortar. I'm the general manager of the Holiday Inn Express, and I'm speaking for Judy Ricker as well as myself because I'll be the new general manager of 121 State Street, which is the State House Hotel, which is the brand new hotel there. And Judy says, I've been a consultant for Mark and Lori Ricordan during the development of the State House Hotel, the former Hotel State Street at 121 State, and my company will manage the hotel when it opens in December. As an aside, we also manage the Holiday Inn Express Hotel Virginia on Haley Street. I'm very enthusiastic about the plan for a new children's museum. It will be a wonderful neighbor for our hotel. Lower State in particular, and all of Santa Barbara can use another significant visitor attraction, particularly one that is family-friendly. Sitting next to the train depot in the heart of to be soon redeveloped Lower State area, we see it as being heavily utilized and a real draw for a tourist segment that we want to encourage, families with children. Near the beach, near downtown, the location is perfect for car-free visitors. We look forward to working with the museum as a partner in the improvement of our city between the freeway and the ocean, improvement that is seriously needed. And I personally think the Children's Museum will be a nice addition to the State Street area next to the train station. A museum is not a commercial venture, and I think that the area will benefit from a family attraction such as this. I think that the museum is a nice complement to the Santa Barbara train station as well as the Reagan Center, Reagan Ranch Center across the parking lot there. And the State House Hotel, which will be right next door to the museum on the beach side, does support the use of this space as a children's museum. We look forward to a nice partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Austin will be followed by Pedro Paz.
I'm David Austin, the Executive Director of the Institute for Energy Efficiency at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I speak to you today as both a scientist, engineer, and educator with 50 years experience educating students in the sciences and engineering area. And that includes a spell at Bell Laboratories, president of Case Western Reserve University, the founding president of the Kavli Foundation, and in my current role, I'm also happy to be a member of the advisory committee of the Children's Museum. There is no better task that you can do, in my opinion, than to approve this project. We at the University of California, Santa Barbara, through our institute, are strongly in support of it and are working with the people on the board of the University of the Children's Museum to develop the exhibits, and in particular to guide them with the development of the building, which, as you know, will be an energy-efficient building in many different ways, and one of the model exhibits in itself. I want to tell you a little story about my own experience with children in science education. When I was at Bell Laboratories, my son, who was at the time in elementary school, used to come into my lab and loved to put his hands on some of the equipment and see all the lasers and things like that. But this generated a bit of a crisis in the family because on one occasion, when we were at the dinner table, my wife announced that she was going to quit her job. And my son spoke up and said, "But Mom, you cannot do that. We won't have any money." My mother quickly pointed out that to my son. She said, "But your dad works." And my son said, "You mean he gets paid for doing that?" And just to illustrate that children do see science very differently. They need that hands-on experience. They see it as an adventure, and I think that's what this museum will do. And I strongly urge you to support the request before you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Paz will be followed by Carolyn Brown.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Pedro Paz. I work for First Five Santa Barbara County. In case you're not familiar with what we do, we fund nonprofits in the community who serve children 0 to 5 and their families. Our commission has already, in a lot of ways, supported this program by funding the Children's Museum to do outreach to the Latino community to find out what they wanted in a children's museum. Previous speakers already spoke about that, so I'm not going to touch upon that. But I'm here to urge you to support this program, the Children's Museum. As a community member, someone who grew up in Santa Barbara, someone who actually spent time at UCSB looking at some of the lab, I also urge you on a personal level to support this. I have two nieces who already are aware that there's going to be a children's museum. We took a train ride. They passed by it. I told them, there's going to be a children's museum there. When? And I said, pretty soon. So I hope that this project gets off the ground, is in place before they get to the point in time where they may not have as much interest, but I certainly hope that you support this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brown will be followed by Cassie Kilgore.
Good afternoon. Carolyn Brown, Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Barbara, celebrating our 73rd year. And we have about 1,200 kids that are members of our club, and I've been telling a lot of them the last year or so that they're going to hopefully build a museum for children, and they are thrilled. And, we are always looking for new things for our kids to do. At our club, we're able to do after-school homework. We do art, sports, computer lab. We do all kinds of programs for the kids. The one thing we don't have or are not able to do at this time is science. And so this is going to be so compatible with what we're doing. We have a bus, we have a van, we can easily transport the kids. During summer, we have 158 kids this last summer every day at the club, and we would love to have some other places to take them. And it's an opportunity for them to learn without them even knowing they're getting educated because they're having so much fun. So I hope you will support this. There's a lot of people out there that would really utilize this facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kilgore will be followed by Holly Carmody.
Good afternoon. My name is Casey Kilgore. I'm the proud principal of Franklin Elementary School. Early in this endeavor, Franklin School became a partner of the Children's Museum. I was honored to do so as our families do not regularly go to museums due to financial hardships and transportation. The Children's Museum will be close enough to walk. Its existence and connection to the school will be very apparent as we've planned regular visits, art exhibits, family science nights, and other various activities that we can have at the museum. Our school slogan, Franklin Kids Go to College. Visiting the museum will create experiences, obtain knowledge, and teach students about museum etiquette and behavior. These are all essentials as students will leave Franklin and attend our local secondary school and colleges. The Children's Museum will be a great addition to our community and visitors alike. So I stand before you as part of 516 students, 57 teachers and staff, over 1,000 parents, and our community to tell you that we can't wait. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Carmody will be followed by Kay Mortar.
I'm Holly Carmody, and I'm representing Community Action Commission of Santa Barbara County. We operate Head Start throughout the county, and we are delighted with the plans for the Children's Museum. We are excited about the educational programming. We are excited about the access that this will provide for low-income families in the county, and especially in the south part of the county. Access is a big deal for the low-income families that are at Head Start, our families, and we're glad that this has been focused on and that these children are included. It's a great location for the families that participate in Head Start, and we just want to lend our wholehearted support.
Thank you. Kay Mortar? She's not here today. Okay. Emilio Handal? Michael Vale. Mr. Vale will be followed by Jim Fitzpatrick.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Vale. I'm principal at Cleveland School on the east side, and I'm actually speaking for Emilio Handel as well. He had to go to a special ed matter back at his school. But both of us came here to support this project enthusiastically. We had Dr. Cash come here Casey Kilgore just spoke to, so all I want to add to their comments in regards to the Children's Museum as a valuable resource to the children here in our school community. I would only add this, that leadership counts. I've been impressed over the last 20 years as principal at Cleveland School by the work that Sheila Cushman has done in this community in terms of supporting children's learning. She and the board of the Children's Museum have gone out of their way to work with our local schools to develop partnerships so that this museum can be a living learning resource to the children of our community. It's in the right place, it's the right time. We hope that you'll consider favorably this application and that we can get this museum built. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vail. Mr. Fitzpatrick will be followed by Judy Reeker, who I believe already spoke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm Jim Fitzpatrick, head of school of Santa Barbara Montessori School. My wife and I started the school 38 years ago, and she was reading to me this morning a piece by Nora Ephron about how people that are younger than I am, or younger than she is, might think that she's old. And I think that some people who are younger than me might think that I'm old. But I am old enough to remember when Santa Barbara didn't have bike paths. I'm old enough to remember when Santa Barbara didn't have bikeways. Bicyclists were at their own assertion, which means that I'm old enough to remember when Alice Keck Park Memorial Garden was just Alice Keck Park's garden or backyard, which means that I'm old enough to remember when Kids World was just an idea in Steve Cushman's head. And that reminds me that Suzanne Elledge and I stood inside of a storage unit issuing tools for several days. And Suzanne organized all of the tools, and I've always been impressed ever since about her ability to organize things. In that, she issued tools to one Ivan Kronja. Ivan Kronja was a sculptor, and that meant that I worked for 3 days with Ivan building the armature and then the cement for the shark and the whale that still patrol the waters of Kids World. And that means that I'm old enough to recall in great detail the inside of this building and these chambers, because it only took us 14 years to get the skate park built, which is now known as Skaters Point, which was a particular project that I steered its way through the community. Which is my way of mentioning that I am very interested in child-based things. And I can't agree with Barry more that this Children's Museum is just awesome. It's just an incredible opportunity for children to have an identity that will be theirs. The one design change that I might suggest is that I think the children's door should be the main entrance and that parents and adults should be forced to go around the corner. I say that facetiously. So as the head of the school, as a father, as a grandfather at this point, really young grandfather, I represent all of the staff, our faculty, and all of the parents in our school. And I know that I would look forward to and suggest the idea, the concept of children being able to say to their parents, "Hey, I want to show you what's going on at school." And the parents can say, it's Saturday, the school's closed. No, I want to show you what we're doing at school because it's at the museum too. Because I think as educators, we all recognize that this museum will supplement what we do. And likewise, as teachers, I think the people in the museum realize that they will be able to supplement what we do, and it will be an incredible partnership. So with all of those people standing behind me that aren't here today, I urge you to approve of this project and look forward to it.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Kay Mortar. Ms. Mortar? She spoke. Okay, then we're done with our speakers. And is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to address the commission on this who hasn't spoke? Okay, I'm going to close the public portion and bring it back to the commission for questions of staff and the applicant. Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, to the staff, on page 5, under the list of modifications, number 1 and number 2 appear to be the same. And I just would like to confirm that with you, or am I not reading it right? ADA access ramp, one is going to Kimberly. Or can you clarify that, please?
Chair Justice and Commissioner Larson, it is listed twice because the modification, there's one for State Street and one for Kimberly. The requirements are the same.
Thank you. And I have two questions for the applicant. One is, in looking at the elevations, I didn't see any rollaway door or anything like that for moving a bus or truck inside for kids to paint, or do you have an outside area that's big for those projects, or you know what I mean? Is there a, is it petite inside, or?
There is a 8-foot wide and over 8-foot tall door into the storage. And the storage, we now have, that comment came up, and we had a pair of 3.0 doors or 6.0 out of storage. We're going to make those a pair of 4.0 doors so the full Volkswagen or whatever they use down in San Diego can get through there.
Okay, thanks. And I have one other question about the poles in the rear, the Edison poles, and maybe it just weave into a comment that it's a pity you couldn't get Edison to donate those poles to go underground.
Might happen.
So that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I'll be happy when it comes time to make a motion to be that motion maker.
Okay, Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did get a letter from, first of all, there's no question that this is a wonderful project, but I do have a couple of concerns. We did get a letter from Union Pacific, and they're requesting a 6-foot-high vandal-resistant fence 25 feet back from the center line of the nearest track. Now, I see that you do have a 6-foot-high fence that looks pretty tough.
25 feet back.
And it is 25 feet back.
Everything that they requested is done.
Great, great. Well, now, there still is some concern, I believe, about, children. I can't imagine children coming by themselves from that parking lot, the spots by the train depot. But is the museum, do you have some plans
We
afoot?
have plans, believe
Okay,
me.
good.
When the site was offered to us, we were somewhat concerned initially. And so in 2007, we contacted Union Pacific, invited them up here. We went out to the site, walked the site, asked them if this was a safe site for a children's museum. We asked them about their accident statistics. They assured us it was a wonderful site. Actually, the engineer that came along said he'd like to work there. We have stayed in communication with them. We have, particularly with their attorney, over the last year, we have stayed in communication. We have implemented all the mitigations. We've removed all of our exhibits and paving and materials off of their easement. We have put in the fence. We've put in the landscaping that is required. In addition, one of the things they mentioned to us that because there are two parallel lines, there is a very low frequency of accidents because you don't have trains sharing tracks. And what else did I want to say here? Also, in terms of school children, I think there was a concern about school children. As Barry mentioned, school children will be dropped off at the rear of the building. We have 2 buses a day, 4 days a week. They enter through the rear, so no school children will be entering from State Street. They'll go be met by a staff person, escorted into our courtyard, and begin their wonderful adventure. Families will be parking in the depot lot, and we know that Santa Barbara has very responsible parents, that they'll be walking carefully with their children. No children under the age of middle school will be allowed to come to the museum on their own. So children that come on their own will be middle school or high school, so we won't have little children coming on their own. And I want to tell you, I'm a parent and I'm a grandparent as well, a young grandparent, by the way. And I am very concerned about safety. I mean, this is a children's museum, for heaven's sake. I mean, we have to keep the children safe in every possible way, not just from the train, but in every possible way. So I feel very pleased that we've had Barry and Susan working with us to help us think that through. And this is a very thoughtful building and very well designed for the safety of children.
I have another question. The parents that are bringing their children there and using the parking spaces on the depot side, it can be anywhere in the depot. Will there be signs, or have you considered signs directing?
We have a whole program mapped out. We will, on our website, have downloadable maps so that parents and anyone coming to the museum will be able to locate parking easily. We'll have on our phone machine a number you can push so that you can learn where to park, and we'll also have information at our desk. So,
Because what I'm thinking about is the possibility of people parking and then going across the tracks and then going down along the tracks on the others. Instead
you mean
of
parking back by Kimberly?
No, parking by the depot, and then instead of coming straight towards State Street and then down on the sidewalk.
Oh, okay. Like we did on Tuesday.
Exactly.
Yes. We were badly behaved. Most families are not that way. But honestly, I think you bring up a very important point. And we did discuss this. I met with the manager of the Amtrak station and discussed this. We feel we're all about education, and we think this is a great opportunity to educate everyone, parents as well as children, about train safety and what do you do when you come to a railroad crossing. So I think, through materials on our website, but also as we're, conversing with parents and families, I think that's what we're hoping to do.
Okay, thank you. I did have a question about, from Ms. Van Atta, about I'd like you to tell us more about what's happening on the deck in terms of the plantings and maintenance and that lovely greenery that's trailing down the wall over the edge of the building there. How is that going to be maintained, and how's that all working?
Okay, maintained and or created or?
Well, it looks very nice in the renderings, and I'm just wondering, how are we going to be how is the museum going to assure that it will remain that way instead of having things happen to it where the plants die and that sort of thing?
Well, actually, a roof garden is the same as any other landscape. So one way that I could answer your question is that we do have some PowerPoint slides that show roof gardens that are 50 and 60 years old that are very beautiful and lush. Would that be helpful? Can you put those in? She's looking for them.
Well,
and
that's all right.
But as I really, maybe I'm not understanding your question, and if I'm not, then of course you can ask it another way. The way that I see roof gardens is that they are the same as other gardens. They do require maintenance, just as a landscape in the ground would. And nowadays, the technology has gotten a lot better for roof gardens, but that's one of the reasons I thought it was important to bring in examples of older as well as new roof gardens. It's basically planting on roofs is really big now. I mean, the city of Chicago actually requires new buildings to have planted roofs because there are a lot of advantages to green roofs that include where you've planted on a green roof, it protects the roof membrane so roofs last a lot longer. Most of the projects I'm working on nowadays, in order to meet the National Pollution and Discharge Guidelines, the NPDES guidelines, we have to have green roofs so that we absorb enough rainwater that falls on the site. So when you have capacity in planters to take up stormwater, that slows down the amount of water that then builds up and causes flooding problems downstream. In addition to actually the planting medium and the plants actually clean that water before it moves on. So here's an example that Barry, this is you probably, have you heard of the High Line in New York City? So the High Line was a train track that delivered supplies amongst warehouses. I know it's centered in the Chelsea district in New York, and I was recently there as well, but it's an amazing garden,
And one of the reasons there was an idea to make this into a garden is that so many weeds and plants had come up on their own. It looked like a garden before they actually made it into a public space. So this is a central area there, but you can see all the planting that occurs. And they have memorialized in places where the train tracks used to come through. So if a garden, if a space in the air is left alone and there's some soil, the plants will come. And I thought I'd reassure you that in terms of maintenance. And then the next one. This is a photo that Barry took, and maybe, where is this, Barry? New York. It's New York also, and I think he's showing how the plants are successfully draping over the edge there as we're intending at our project. Another close-up of the High Line. You can see where the tracks used to come through, but all of this is new planting actually around the train tracks in the High Line. I hope the landscaping on top of the roof doesn't migrate to our train tracks. That's right. It could be a problem. And then next, I'll just whip through them really quickly. This is the Kaiser building in Oakland, a famous roof garden that was built in the 60s. Really beautiful, beautiful garden. More areas of the roof garden at Kaiser. And then some snapshots I took from the bank building downtown in L.A. of some historic roof gardens. And now they're over 50 years old, so they could qualify as historic gardens designed by famous landscape architects. Here's one next. And another one, I think this is Garrett Ekbo, designed this one. And a local example of a green roof in a Santa Barbara style. This is right near the high school. This is St. Mary's Square, just outside of Chinatown in San Francisco, and this was a Robert Royston garden on top of a parking that's 60 years old. And see these trees? They're 60 years old. So it's really the same, I think, built correctly and maintained as any other garden would be as a garden on the ground. And that's the way we're thinking of it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's not as much of a challenge as I thought it was.
No, it's getting much easier all the time.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions about the parking demand study. Would that address them to you, Ms. DeBusk? Says I was curious as to, I couldn't really tell what month it was done, if it was done in the summer, and then and related to then also the use of the depot lot, there were averages there on occupancy, and let's just pick a summertime again. Is it ever actually full between 9 and 3 on a summer weekday or summer weekend?
Chair Justice and Commissioner Jordan, here's a slide of the two most recent months, just for your information. And these are from September and August 2011. And as you can see, they show variations. These slides have a peak of just under 80%, so a little bit higher than what the information that we used for the traffic and parking study was. But we've also looked back to some historical data to see if these have changed significantly over time. And the few months that we looked at as a comparison had relatively similar occupancies. So these are averages. These graphs show you various hours of the day and what those occupancies are. As you can see, the peaks are weekends around 2 to 3 o'clock, which is as you might expect. And also the applicant's traffic consultant, Scott Schell, is here. He may be able to answer more detailed questions, as well as Stacy Wilson from the city's transportation division.
Even when if it got to 80%, there's at least 30 plus spaces still available.
That's correct. At 80%, there would be 32 spaces.
And the parking agreement that's referenced, is that just a paper method to acknowledge that there's spaces available for consideration of the mod? You're actually not signaging spaces and setting them aside for the museum, are you?
Commissioner Justice and Chair Jordan.
The other way.
Chair Jordan.
He'll be surprised
Justice
to hear
and
that.
Commissioner
Reverse him.
Jordan.
Want to take the meeting over?
We're not intending to sign the spaces because then they wouldn't function as efficiently, so that's not the intent. And the off-site parking agreement has not been drafted, so the exact language hasn't been worked out, but that's something that we would do if this project moves forward.
Okay. And then the the question of how we walked around on Tuesday was intriguing to me too, and I didn't pay enough attention, and I don't get to the end of Chapala often enough to notice. But what would prevent, once the Museum Paseo is open between Kimberly and State Street, from terminating access across the tracks there at the end of Chapala as we walked back and forth?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The question was raised that we went the most dangerous way. We walked across the tracks on that little set of gravel and stairway and such. And if that's a concern for people, guilty, I'm sure. The car's full of kids. They're screaming. It's a full parking lot. It's a ways to walk around. I see somebody walking in front of me on a shortcut to Kimberly, and so I take the family in the stroller and say, I'm walking across the train tracks like we did. Well, if that way wasn't available, and it was obvious then that I had to go out to State and go that way, what's involved in that decision to be made to where you couldn't cut the corner there to get to the backside of Kimberly to come in that direction?
Commissioner Jordan, I think there would need to be several barriers throughout because there are multiple access points at this point in time. There's one through the Depot Park, as you can see on this slide, and then there is also across Chapala Street. So short of erecting a fence all the way across, I'm not sure what could be done.
It's a challenge, but the problem remains. Then last question is, talking about the historic Signalman building, who owns or maintains or decides what to do with that building?
Chair Justice and Commissioner Jordan, the building is on city property, so the city does own the building. The city has done maintenance as required. However, it's a historic building, and therefore actual improvements to the building would need to be vetted through a structures report and that sort of thing. Many years ago, there was a proposal to turn that into a public restroom, and there was concern that the alterations needed to carry that forward would impact the building's historic nature, and so that never came to fruition.
But a discussion on maintaining the historic nature, but incorporating it more into the museum use or operations would be just a discussion between the museum and the city.
Correct. There may also be other challenges such as accessibility and things such as that that could have issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Schwartz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that Mr. Jordan and I are kind of in alignment on some of these questions. I'll be brief. Back to parking, I noticed that should the city in the future merge the project site with the depot lot, that what would currently be considered off-site could eventually be viewed as on-site. My question primarily is about the cost of the parking to the visitors of the museum, and I'm not sure, Ms. Cushman, if somebody else maybe could speak to this. We've heard a lot today about the importance of this being an inclusive and welcoming community resource. So for those who don't have the luxury of paying that kind of city lot parking, is there going to be some sort of compensation or discount for those parking in the depot lot who are visiting the museum, whether they're members or not?
Actually, we forgot to mention that we are going to be incentivizing visitors, any visitors that do not travel to the museum in cars. So they will receive discounted admission if they come on a bus, walk, skateboard, train. So we're very excited about that. I mean, that's our philosophical commitment. But I honestly think the location, the central location, somewhat close to Lower East Side and Lower West Side of town, make it fairly easy for families to walk there. So that's why this location is very important.
So while I have you up here, just to touch on the Signalman's building, is there any thought at this time as to how the museum might use it as?
We initially, when we were offered the property, we were very excited about the Signalman's building, and we wanted to have it be part of our project. As part of the Historic Landmarks Commission process, we had a historic structures report done, and we had to, we're told we had to move our building 16 feet away from it, so we have done that. I actually spoke to the redevelopment agency and asked if there were funds to upgrade it, because I think you all saw it now up close. It's a pretty funky building. And they don't have funds to upgrade it. But honestly, it's a shame, because I think children would love to see something fun and be able to look in the windows. I mean, it's so sad that the windows are painted over and you can't even look inside. So that's where that is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bartlett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick question regarding the traffic study that was done, and on page 8, it makes reference to the additional public parking that's available. There's 18 spaces on Yananali, and then it says there's an additional 40 spaces located in the public parking lot at the corner of Ray, that's R-E-Y, Road, and Montecito Street. And where would that, okay, it wasn't on any of the diagrams in our packet. So is that actually a named street, Ray Road?
Yeah,
Oh.
right next to the
Wow.
railroad station.
Yeah. Okay, that's a new one on me. Thank you.
Tough one to follow up on, Mr. Bartlett. We were just talking about providing incentives for folks to use other modes than the auto to come to the museum, and I was curious, how do you know whether somebody skateboarded or took the bus? Is this just kind of a
Proof in some way.
okay?
We are actually going to have a place for kids to keep their skateboards.
Great. Okay. And this is a question to staff. Which comes first, Chapala Street Bridge replacement or this project?
Chair Justice, it is possible that this one would come first. It just depends on the timing of each project and how they move forward. You haven't seen that project for a decision yet, so it's tough to say.
Okay. I think that does it for my questions, so let's move on to comments. Mr. Jordan, you want to start things out?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Dr. Cash left, but I get to say I have 4 children who've all been through local elementary, junior high, high school, college, and I think he absolutely hit it on the head when he said we're falling behind, and it's a sad state of affairs in the educational structure, and we're truly blessed, I think, to live in a town where so many people can come together and collaborate on a need and find a location and bring this type of momentum behind such a project. I'm ready to wholeheartedly support all the modifications, all the other decisions. The Jordans would like to support this as soon as you can get a request in front of us, and I'm happy to show my wife again that I'm the oldest child in the family. So I've had the only concern I've really had is about the parking, and I think that's clearly been shown that there's adequate spaces there. I do have some concerns about what it's going to do to the dynamics of the parking or the neighborhood on Kimberly and Yananoli, and there's a Las Agaves, but I know that's a restaurant I like, not the name of the street. It's close. And in particular, Yananoli and the Las Agaves Street are not currently controlled for neighborhood parking, but Chapala is and Natoma is. And a suggestion I would have there to the city would be that if there is an impact there, that we facilitate due to the concessions and the emphasis we're placing upon this project as a community benefit, that the city also show that same consideration to those neighborhoods if they wish to move in the direction of a neighborhood parking permit. And if there's a fee associated with that, that we find a way to waive it. If there's requirements associated with that, that the city takes the lead in moving that forward. One of the other, well, I have several. I'll just go through several. One of the other disappointments I have that Ms. Cushman already spoke to, and that's the lack of inclusion of the signalman's house. I think it's a shame that that the back side or the side that's closest to your outdoor space on the museum property cannot be opened up and that building restored so that the Signalman's house could be part of the experience of that side of the museum and its relationship to the depot, where you would somehow maintain the historical integrity of that building, but have it so that it was part of the museum grounds and they could look through that, be in it, and look out at the train station and the depot. And I'd encourage you to continue to work on the city for that and maybe find a way to do that. I know Commissioner Lodge can talk much more intelligently than I can about historical reuse. Yeah, I'll just annoy her on my disdain for cultural buildings and why can't we just use them, and she can talk much more intelligently about that. And I also think that the placement of this development also should bring up another discussion about the Depot Park and whether it is a park or whether it's a historical place. In my little world of historical relevance, a park should be used and enjoyed rather than just sitting there and sort of shown. And this is an opportunity, I think, to maybe open that discussion again and revitalize that area so that also becomes part of the experience. I'm particularly impressed with, again, the broad collaboration across the community, the commitment to access to all economic and cultural levels of the community. I've been impressed with the ability of the board of directors or the management of the museum to reach out to so many people in the community. I think we got 120 letters. And it's from a wide range of community members, different social structures, different society structures, different educational levels, and I think that's exactly where this project needs to go. Yeah, I'll just prattle on, so I think, Mr. Chair, we'll just move it down the line and let some of the other comments come. Thank you.
Thank you for.
I will support each one of the modification requests and the coastal development permit and the development plan and a positive recommendation to council for the priority designation of the square footage.
Okay, I'm going to call on Ms. Schwartz, who had her light on next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quite frankly, I cannot think of a more exciting project that I have heard of, and certainly in my second year as a planning commissioner that has come to us. And I grew up in Santa Barbara. So I am so pleased that this project, in its mature state that you've brought to us, in my opinion, is ready to move forward. This property is perfect for this type of community resource. And some of the phrases that we've heard today, a playground for your brain, a marriage of play and science, this is a long time coming in Santa Barbara. And I think this is truly going to vitalize and revitalize this part of the lower State Street near beach area. In fact, I'm thinking, how about a museum pass? So many other cities have that. I think that I bought one of those when I was in Paris a few years ago, and I overpaid for the pass, but that was revenue to Paris, and didn't go to all the museums. But it was so exciting to know that with this one booklet, you know, I could experience a rich array of cultural activities in that city. And, you know, we've talked about collaboration. It's sort of become a buzzword. In the 6 years I moved back to Santa Barbara, a lot of nonprofits and a lot of foundations are using the buzzword collaboration. But truly, what you have done in reaching out to the most diverse group of organizations, private, public, and individuals, is really remarkable and I think truly admirable. When I look at the design that you have proposed, the scale is appropriate. It's beautiful that it harkens sort of to the beach, the sandcastle-like look, and that it's whimsical, which is part of the play. I think all fits so beautifully together. And I particularly like this view juxtaposed against the white block Beacons building. Apologize to Beacons, no offense intended. But I think it shows off the beauty that you're going to bring to what otherwise is a great experience in bringing the math, technology, science, and the arts here. This will be, I think, one of the most exciting and rich cultural and community experiences that we could possibly bring to current generations and future generations. And I'm looking forward to Commissioner Larson making that motion because I intend to second it. Thank you.
Ms. Larson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I clearly remember the first real scientific words I learned that I knew were science, and those two words were Van de Graaff generator. I believe I was 8 years old when I had that hair-raising experience and enjoyed seeing my mother's hair raise as well, as she took me to a museum in San Francisco that had an area where children could experiment with science. But I was so excited to know those two words, Van de Graaff generator, and never forget what it did. Anyway, there are so many pluses, of course. I am so grateful that the view from the train will be so much enriched. As we pass through Santa Barbara and we think about our 101 corridor, we forget about our train experience, and we all know how rich that is with graffiti, trash, and everything else. And I think that this will be one of the unintended consequences of this museum. I think it's going to help retain educated young people in Santa Barbara with a positive experience and a connection not only through our elementary schools, middle school, high school, but also connect to UCSB and the other educational institutions in the area. I just think that it opens up so much possibility for retention of youth in town because they'll have even more compelling reasons. I'm thrilled because it means my grandkids will have a lot to do here. They already do because we take them rowing and we do lots of great stuff. But this is just another draw for them. And they do live where there are children's museums, and they're delighted about it. I think we are also so fortunate to have generous and public-spirited people with money, time, and talent who say, oh, it's all right, I'm going to do it pro bono, or I'm going to put up 6 figures for this. We are so lucky to live in a city where we have a generous base. And I am thrilled that this museum is so taken to heart already. It's a wonderful thing. So and I had a suggestion. Maybe when people come with their parking, you can ask them at the door about the parking ticket, and it gets stamped with a little bicycle stamp. That way the city could tell how many people are actually using the lot. Plus, it's not a validation, but it would just help remind them that if they come, they get that reduced rate. Just a thought, but at least you can sort of screen at the door or some way so that also the city can track the parking. Anyway, that's just a thought. So I am so thrilled to support this. And you think you have 100 ambassadors. You really have thousands of ambassadors everywhere. Every person who comes into that museum, experiences it, and leaves will be richer for it. And everyone who walks by it, we talk a lot about pedestrian friendly. We talk a lot about treating the senses. This is going to do it. It's going to be wonderful for everyone. And I do believe that unless you have a kid in tow, you can't go. So you better look around for a child. Thank you very much. And I will be making a motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm not sure I can add anything to all the glowing things that have been said about this museum. I do want to assure Mr. Jordan that the draft historic resources element puts a big emphasis on adaptive reuse of historic buildings that are no longer viable in their original use. And I hope that someday, I wouldn't want to ask this group to, in any way put some pressure on them now, when I know you have to go out and raise a lot of money to do what's before us. But I hope sometime in the future that there will be a way to include the signalmen's building as part of the museum, and it's part of history, part of railroad history. They're right next to it, so I hope that will come in the future. But I, too, am fully supportive of what's before us.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, there's nobody that would have appreciated this project more than my parents. As a child growing up in Santa Barbara, every day they had to drive me to the railroad crossing so we could sit, wait for the train, and listen to them blow the whistle. So this is like such a perfect location. I wish I could go back and do it all over again, and I hope that, you know, the roof decks and the other balconies and so forth that are included in this facility are designed such that the children really can look down and view the train, which really represents the past and the old train station, and then go indoors and see the future and really take it all in. So I hope that, you know, the railings have the same attention as the entry doors and really make them children friendly so that the train depot can really be part of the experience. And I think it's going to be a great example not only of sustainability but of really a livable green roof, because I think that can really vitalize Santa Barbara. And Santa Barbara, I think, is best viewed from the rooftops, and I think that's an experience not many people get to share in this town. So I hope that this project really makes that a more public experience. And I echo the other comments about hoping that someday the Signalman's building can be somehow incorporated or at least celebrated in a more substantial way. And maybe this project will also be the impetus to really further develop and integrate the Depot Park. And I know we have the new bridge replacement coming. So hopefully there's enough other projects that we can really pull together this neighborhood and really link it together in a great way for pedestrians and the children, and not just make it a place to park vehicles in parking lots and streets. So I think it's a great project. It's wonderful to see everybody come together on this, and I hope that we can help speed it along. And I love the playfulness of the project and can't wait for it to be built, and hopefully it will generate as much enthusiasm in terms of the construction as the Kids World did. So I think you'd have a lot of volunteers. So I look forward to supporting every aspect of this.
Thank you, Mr. Bartlett. A question for staff before I get into my comments. From here, the process is to go back to both ABR and landmarks for final approval, and then get into the design drawing development and get through the building permit process. Is that
Chair Justice,
essentially what we're looking at?
Essentially, the project needs project design approval, which we used to call preliminary, from the HLC, and then final design, and then construction drawings. Also, they'll need to work through City Council to get their community priority designation, and then we'll also need to formalize the lease with the city through the City Council.
And when does that community priority designation get made by the City Council?
That would likely happen very shortly. The lease could take a longer time, so the expectation was that the community priority designation would go first, just to complete that aspect of the project, and then the lease would follow later.
Okay. This project, to me, is a success story waiting to happen. What stands in front of it is a process that could slow it down and add not only considerable cost to the actual project's implementation, but more importantly, send the wrong message to the funding that people are going to generously offer to get this project built. And I think that it would be wonderful for the city, in using its community priority designation, to recognize that it is a LEED Silver building and add some special consideration to the project in making that community priority designation stick. And what I'm talking about is I think our motion to approve this project should include the city administrator making a commitment to place this project at the front of the line for all of the design review and all of the remaining city hearings not to mention the building permit process of getting plans approved so that things can move forward as quickly as possible. What that will do for this collaborative group of organizations is give them an extra boost in their fundraising opportunities so that their funders will know that their well-earned and well-donated funds will not go towards the process. It'll go towards getting the project operational. And we've heard from day one that this is an incredibly important project. And the community is behind it. So I would hope that something could be added to the motion. If it's not there, I will make some comments myself. But to reflect in the community priority designation, not only a priority land use, but priority processing that will make a success story that people can point to and say, this is the way it should be done. They didn't get frozen in time once they got their Planning Commission approval. They can get there faster than the bridge project, even though they're both important. I sense this has a little bit bigger picture to it. And I think the applicant and the city would do well by rewarding that type of behavior with incentives that will make this happen as soon as possible. Ms. Larson, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve this project and make the findings in the staff report of September 29, 2011 to include approval of the 3 modifications, the access ramp along State Street, the encroachment along Kimberly, a modification to provide less than the required number of parking spaces, the coastal development permit, the development plan, as Chair Jostes mentioned, that we create the priority for the development plan to go forward,
Just the amendment.
and to make a recommendation of the findings for final community and priority development to the City Council and to the City Administrator to prioritize the land use and development of this project through staff.
Could we make sure that the motion covers the specific entitlements we're voting on? Did I miss that? It's in the motion?
Hope
Okay.
not. I
Okay.
think I said the modifications.
Okay, good. Ms. Lodge,
Coastal
seconded?
development?
Yes.
Okay.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Vincent.
Before the commission votes on this, I want to suggest one revision to the conditions of approval. It's on page 4 of 13. It's condition C8 regarding the off-site parking agreement. The presentation before you today showed that it's anticipated that the entire depot lot would be available for parking for this site. The first sentence of this condition says that the parking would be within 500 feet of the project site. And those two numbers, as you saw on the example, don't jive. I'd recommend that the first sentence read, 29 off-site parking spaces shall be provided for the project in the depot lot, period. And that would remove the conflict between the condition and what you saw as far as the availability of the parking lot.
That's fine with the maker of the motion.
Chair
Okay,
Justice, I think staff has a further refinement.
Chair Justice and members of the Commission, I'm Stacy Wilson with Transportation Planning, and in coming up with the off-site or the discussion about the off-site parking agreement, we carefully made the language as loose as possible, as flexible as possible, because we currently have under construction an additional parking lot across the street, across State Street, and a little farther down towards 101 under construction. We didn't, at the time that we were working on this project, we didn't know which would come first. So we knew that the depot lot had spaces striped and on the ground and some availability. But we were looking to have the maximum amount of flexibility so that downtown parking can work with the museum and just meet the needs, you know, perhaps assign employees to park in the lot on State Street and have the visitors park in the depot lot. So if that's
Mr. Chair?
acceptable.
With that in mind, then I would recommend that the first sentence read, 29 off-site parking spaces shall be provided for the project in a manner consistent with Section 2890.001.18 of the Municipal Code. That is the section that details the provisions of off-site parking agreements for the city, and it would allow for any parking spaces within 1,250 feet of the project site to be available for the parking. And then we'll negotiate which spaces in which lots at a future time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Justice?
Yes.
That would be fine with me as a seconder. I do have a question for Ms. Wilson. If La Entrada gets built, isn't the parking structure there going to provide some public parking as well?
Chair Justice and Commissioner Lodge, yes, we're anticipating that as a part of that project that there is a parking structure that's built, then it would have additional spaces available to the public. And I don't recall the number right now, but it was quite a few. 42 parking spaces.
Okay, thank you. So that would, what Mr. Vincent proposed would include that as well as a possibility, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You bet. Just one comment on the motion as it stands. I'm always concerned about just saying that it's a priority. Doesn't have enough legs to get there. And I would request that either the motion or some accompanying language direct the chair to work with staff in crafting some complementary language to the resolution that would articulate the Commission's interest in expediting the review approval process of a community priority project with these types of lead standards.
That's great. Let's incorporate that into the motion.
Trying to make it simple, but get it done.
Mr. Justice has volunteered.
All right, it's all
Okay.
right with me as the
let's-
seconder.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. You have a project? This project is appealable to the City Council within 10 days. Thank you very much. And we will now move on to our last item.
I certainly will. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to take your conversations outside so the Commission can conclude its business this afternoon. Okay, our last item on our agenda today, I believe, are reports from our staff hearing officer liaison to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was a very short meeting at the show, and the first project was on Medcliff Road and involved a fence, and it was approved. And the second project was on Samarkand Drive, and it also was supported. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Wilson, could you quiet down the folks in the back there? Okay. The next is reports from committee liaisons.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Lodge?
Yes, for the airport, you can see a picture on the screen of what our old beloved terminal looks like now. They have removed the wing on the south side and are in the process of removing the wing on the north side. They've removed the lead and asbestos, and the device in the foreground, the big crane with a big drill, is working on stabilizing the soil, making it so that it will not liquefy in an earthquake. And that was done for underneath the new terminal as well. And where that drill device is working is where the old terminal will be moved ultimately. There's a pile of dirt next to the north end of the new terminal that will be used as fill, and it all has to be worked in together and so on. In any event, that'll take about 3 weeks in the process, and they have to raise the level of the old terminal. When they move it, it will be on the same level as the new one because that is a flood area there. The airport, they're going ahead on their master plan. It's expected to take 2 years. One of the things that will be including in that is moving all of the general aviation activity to the north side near Hollister, which would take care of the issue that keeps getting continued for us about the T-hangars. And on the new terminal, Karen Ramsdell, the airport director, said most comments have been positive, but there's some people who still prefer the old terminal. The restaurant has doubled business. It's probably largely because people come there and they can go to the restaurant after they've gone through security, rather than having to go through that and not have access, do it before and not be able to bring any of the food into the area after security. Gift shop sales are up 40%, and Santa Barbara products in particular are doing very well. TSA is 100% positive about their new facilities, and the airport got a Santa Barbara Beautiful Award for the new terminal, and Karen Ramsdell got one herself for her efforts toward beautification.
Very good. Thank you. Having no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.